The following is a copy of a post made on a small lost media-focused Discord server, and the transcription that was passed around for about a week before the server was mysteriously shut down. Though a cliché, it may have been a governmental department that took notice of the server and 2 of the files it had hosted for only a few days. It feels like they went out of their way in targeting our obscure community of just about a dozen individuals, but several of the former members I've talked to seem to agree that doing so just goes to show how much they're monitoring similar information, and what they'll do to continue a barely known cover-up. If nothing else, the shutdown only further gives credence to this story, or at least aspects of it. This story isn't mine. I'm just one of the people trying to preserve it. I do not know the original poster or where they are now. Our small group enjoyed tracking down the darkest and deepest of lost media, the kind of material not covered by trendy YouTube videos or the most esoteric iceberg compilations. During our short existence, we were able to find 3 of the rarest pieces of media in the world and digitize them. The kinds of things so deeply buried out there that perhaps only 1 or 2 people can remember seeing them. They were harmless. 2 commercials from small countries, and a minute-long bizarre radio advertisement from the 1980s. They aren't really worth talking about. It's not like anyone reading this would have ever known they existed. Our 4th kind, however, is worthy of preservation. Originally posted on December 25th, 2024. Hey everyone. I've been sitting on this finished transcript for a few days now, itching to share it, but I figured I'd wait and give you guys a Christmas present. This relates to my personal search for a strange and nightmarish radio show that played on WSYR in Syracuse, New York, starting at midnight on August 12th, 1978. I was only 7 at the time, old enough to know that I liked staying up later than I was supposed to so that I could listen to something that felt rebellious, but too young to understand everything I was hearing, or to have every childhood memory be solid and coherent. You remember being a kid and having an experience that stuck with you as you grow up, but you realize that it's fuzzy and unclear? Sort of dreamlike? And the more you try to explain it, the more you find out you just can't. Because details have been lost to time and it's impossible to make perfect sense out of something you lived through? Yeah. This is like that. I spent my late Saturday nights as a kid listening to a radio show hosted by Manny Willem. Who? My point exactly. I brought this up in the server before, and just one of you have even heard of the guy, only because they also grew up in central New York. So, some context is going to be needed before I can get into his lost and last episode. My family was poor and we couldn't afford cable TV. So radio was one of the main sources of entertainment. While other kids were going to movies on the weekends or watching Saturday morning cartoons, I was scouring the airwaves for new songs or talk shows with topics that piqued my interest. And in a time when I was too young to watch SNL, I settled onto one of the few pieces of programming that I actually made a conscious effort to listen to every time it aired. While my folks enjoyed their golden era Saturday Night Live, I kept my room's lights off and listened to Manny in the Dark, which really set the mood. Manny had one of the voices for radio. A dulcet, clear, yet slightly deep and scratchy voice. Like a version of Casey Kasem that smoked a pack a day. He had a quick wit, kept up to date on every offbeat news story and latest urban legend, and traded friendly barbs with his guests as he audibly puffed on his cigs at his booth. His topics included aliens, ghosts, cults, conspiracies, histories, mysteries, and all things unexplainable. In other words, he ran a localized version of Coast to Coast AM a decade before Art Bell went live with his show. Only he didn't take calls, instead relying on his ability to read the fringes of society that wanted on his show so that he could curate his own brand and quality of content. He'd answer fan mail, sure, but he was always clear that he didn't have time for nonsense on his show, nor was he going to pursue every wild claim that would have otherwise come in through his speakers. And sadly for me, I only managed to catch the very tail end of his career that began as a typical daytime rock DJ and briefly morphed into one of the providers of early metal in the New York area. In 1975, he found his dream job, albeit at a very late hour. Just 3 years later, he announced his retirement as he knew it was only a matter of time before his lung cancer would make it too difficult to host a talk show. Still, for the year that I felt like I had a friend who shared in my taste for the weird and scary, I was one of the coolest kids at my school. Well, at least in my mind. None of the other elementary school students knew who I was talking about. If I had been born a little earlier, though, I probably could have been part of some insider crowd at my middle or high school. I was barely old enough to understand the concept of a series finale when Manny's last show, announced in advance, played out on that hot August night. It ended so abruptly and oddly that I think I must have believed it was some sort of joke. I remember staying up a week later, waiting for him to come back on the air and give his listeners a proper goodbye, only to hear some BBC news story about the selection process for a new pope. Nothing about Manny, and in my young mind, where everything was a book with an ending that resulted in a closed book, that was that. Like a switch clicking off. It was the conclusion of one small part of my life and I moved on, rarely thinking about the show. Yet it still lingered as a blurry, poorly understood moment, like something insidious that hovered on the border of childhood memory and dream. Being in this community for a few months inspired me to pursue this on my own, and luckily, I never left the area and still had some old friends who helped me search. We started with broad strokes like these hunts always do, calling the radio station and asking about archives, or more information if nothing else. The furthest we got through official channels was in talking to one of the older managers who remembered the show, though he only listened infrequently. He pulled this number out about being there, about there being maybe only a couple thousand people max that tuned in for Manny. No idea how true that might be or where he would have gotten the statistic, but it wouldn't surprise me. I won't bore you with all the details about the search unless you want them later. A few weeks in, we find this local guy's post on Facebook about what to do with his late father's tape collection, and he's already responded to a question about what's on them. The reply? Talk radio shows from the 70s to the 90s. We wonder why the dad wanted to archive them. I get in contact, and it's surprisingly just that easy this time. The next day, I'm at the son's place in a room full of shelves holding old cassette tapes. He tells me he never really listened to any of them, but knew that his dad had built a library of shows he found interesting to go back to and pop in at his leisure. He was never much of a music guy, so this is what he had instead. The collection is well organized, and I find the shelf packed full of Manny Willem tapes in minutes. It looks like he had every show recorded, and at the very end is, of course, the final episode. I'll note that most of the tape cases I saw in this room were dusty with scratches in their cheap plastic. The August 12th Manny Willem show, however, had a particularly scratched and scuffed case, and less dust than the others. I took that as an indication that it had been listened to frequently. I asked if the dad ever might have made notes on the shows, or was known to look deeper into things, or if he remembered him talking about this tape more than the others after I plucked it out. Nah, he answers. His dad was a private person and kept busy with work, so he probably wouldn't have had time to compile theories or whatever else. I think that also explained the multiple old, worn-out Walkmans in a bin in the room. I'm gracious that he lets me borrow the tape, and I treat it like precious cargo on the way home, with it very possibly being the only known recording of the episode, in which case, the collection may be one of a kind, too. When I get home, I break out my old hardware and make a duplicate right away, and then I digitize the duplicate onto my computer. I run some basic filters and other audio enhancements on the file, because why not? Not like the sound quality from an analog AM station in 1978 is going to be that great, and I get to listening. Doing so returns me to my childhood room from so long ago, and sends a few shivers down my spine. Damn, it really came back to me all at once. After my first listen, I start over and get to transcribing. Meticulously, I rewind and play it at a slower speed often so that I can get every word, hear something I might have missed, and with the volume way up and the applied filters. I do notice some disturbing tiny moments and audio that no one would pick up on throughout a first listen. Something wasn't right in the recording booth during this show. I can't explain it exactly, but I will mention a few anomalies I picked up on during my transcription. Other than the things that are objectively there, maybe it's more of a personal feeling about the whole show. Like there's a tension coming in through the audio? An oppressive darkness, for lack of a better word? I've excluded the breaks and the lead-ins to them to focus solely on the show. As always, it opens with several seconds of brain damage playing. You know, the central song on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon? And there it is, Syracuse. Manny comes in over the fade-out. The last time I ever get to play that for you. Bittersweet, our last show. Sorry that I have to leave you folks to explore and talk about the world's curios on your own, but just because my dream didn't last long or get a primetime slot, doesn't mean I have regrets. Let's make them too few to mention tonight, won't we? I've been saving this one for a while, waiting for the perfect time. Didn't expect it'd be for the end, but I couldn't find a guest to outdo this one as our grand finale storyteller. You've never heard of this tale, and heck, I've stopped him from telling me the whole thing because I wanted to keep some of the surprise for myself. Moving right along, every minute of this hour needs to be a good one. How are you all doing tonight? Another rough week like all the others? For old time's sake, I'm still gonna open with a little throwaway news story and get my opinion in on the world's events, even for our last show. Now, I didn't really want to talk about this or give these lunatics any credence, but have you ever heard this controversy coming out of the science world? Last month in Manchester, a healthy boy was born. Nothing special about that, right? Well, this one, people are calling a test tube baby. Like he was grown in a vat? Something you'd see in a 50s B movie? I don't know. And you got these knuckleheads and holier-than-thou types talking about how he wasn't born with a soul. And on the other side, we find conspiracy nuts saying he's been genetically engineered or some nonsense, as if he's going to grow up to be a super soldier or have psychic powers. Who knows, man? These insane ideas are getting harder and harder to keep up with. It's artificial fertilization, that's all. And taking a few of the more fun steps of the whole thing out of the process, it's going to be commonplace in a few years. You'll see. Well, unless, humanity just created an empty vessel that Satan can use to enter into our world. No, I'm not serious. The Omen was playing on HBO last night and I watched it drunk. Okay. With that out of the way, let's welcome our guest waiting patiently in the other room. His name is Stanislaw Kozak, and if you guessed that he was born in Poland, you'd be right. Mr. Kozak is probably the oldest guy I've ever had on. Do you mind if I tell him your age? Yes, he's 82 years old. Born in the 19th century. Imagine the things and places this man has seen. And that beard is magnificent. Now, Mr. Kozak, why don't you share with us your, hook?
Remind me what that means.
What you said when we first got in touch? The crux of your story that got me to listen?
I told you of the time I reported on the summoning of a demon.
Mr. Kozak's accent is subtle, and he speaks clearly and succinctly for a man his age. We will soon find out that he's been in the country for many years. How do you like that, folks? Manny hypes the audience. If that doesn't glue you to your seat, I don't know what you've been waiting for these last 3 years. Summoning a demon? Of course, that isn't exactly true, is it?
No, it is not. But the truth is more complicated. This is, as you say, just the hook. Begin with something easily understood. Get the other party to listen. Give them a chance to become invested.
Okay, friend. So if it's not a demon, what did you bring into the world?
The next closest thing. And this happened in 1929.
Wow, that feels like ancient history.
It is not as long ago as you may feel it is, Mr. Willem. A short jump backward in the grand scheme. But a very different time, yes. No television, no computers. Cars were simple and slow. Few people had ever flown.
And the Great Depression was about to kick off. Your demon didn't have anything to do with that, did it?
I doubt it. This took place in November, a month after the crash.
So tell us, who were these summoners, and is this even what they set out to do originally? Or did they draw a pentagram, chant, and use black magic?
They were, mostly, closer to scientists than believers in the occult. These were intellectuals of the time, out to try to prove things as they saw the world changing, too quickly to keep up. They knew the old world of mysticism and ancient spiritual beliefs was dying. If magic were ever real, it was fading.
All right. What kind of people were in this group? How many?
There were 12 on our team, and several other groups just like ours, all over the world, visiting places that claimed to have been haunted and other holy sites or hallowed grounds. We looked for the beasts and beings of folklore going back centuries. Ghosts, spirits, demons. We sought everything from fairies and skinwalkers to goblins and selkies. Met people claiming to be witches, tried to prove hexes were real. If we were in transit, on a train or ship, with nothing else to do, we'd try to speak to the dead, talk to one another through telepathy, or, on occasion, even attempt to conjure a tulpa.
An entity given life through the, will of a human mind.
Yes, but we never saw anything in this world to prove that there were more layers to reality or creatures lost to time. We had mentalists, a spiritual healer, a proclaimed medium who had growing doubts in the sincerity of her own ability, a psychic who assured us he was once able to move objects from a distance as a child, even a former exorcist of the Catholic Church, 2 experts in the esoteric and folklore, and 3 skeptics who kept us grounded in truth and acted as a counterbalance to any observations skewed by idealism.
You say we. Weren't you only reporting on others' efforts?
Several of these people were old friends, and I was ingrained within the group. Officially, my role was to report any findings we made to the others. And to newspapers, perhaps, should we witness or find anything substantial and verifiable. Failing that, I also had plans to turn my mountains of notes into a book, chronicling our attempts. Our well-funded academic journey to prove that anything other than science and observable truth had merit, or ever did. We followed a comprehensive process wherever we went, improved upon it. After 4 years of traveling, we were tired and ready to return home, having proven nothing. The skeptics were winning.
Speaking as one myself, you can't exactly prove that a mystical element didn't at some point exist throughout history.
Perhaps not. But what we had seen were nothing more than empty traditions. Fear of unknowns that were no longer relevant in a modern age. The old ways, scattered among small villages in the places of the world that did not yet have electricity or indoor plumbing, feudally maintained by old men whose parents drilled into them the concepts of cruel gods, fate, and sins. Shadows lurk, waiting for weakness to exploit, as frightful creatures in the woods look for the foolish to spirit away, and ghosts with unfinished desires haunt the night. No, we saw nothing that couldn't be disproven with logic, medicine, and light brought into darkness. They'd still make idols to false or dead deities, believing a greater mind continued to watch over them and dictated their rewards or punishments.
I take it all of you were, or became, atheists?
We seldom spoke on personal beliefs, though I know there were several agnostics among us, at least near the end of our travels. Religion and belief in any higher power is easier when you let it come to you. Go looking for it, make demands that evidence reveals itself, and you may find it slipping away. I watched some of the others grow increasingly delusioned as a result of our not seeing something other than nature and humanity. I personally never really believed in anything other than random chance, so it didn't bother me. But not everybody is able to bow down to the noise and the nothingness. I saw it more than once among the group. Accepting that there is no plan, no magic, no spirits or gods, it can crush those that want to, need to, believe in something more.
Well, I admit, this isn't how I expected this story to open. However, my listening audience, we still have a demon waiting to come into this retelling, and I'm sure that it reignited a few sparks in the group. Unless you'd like to talk faith for a bit longer, Mr. Kozak?
No, I'm ready to move on to what your listeners have been waiting patiently for. We were ready to leave America, by boat, out of New York City. However, the markets had crashed only a couple of weeks ago by that point. People were still in a panic, and transit was disrupted. Not that it would have made much of a difference if the train still ran on time, as we found ourselves stranded in this very city when a blizzard descended upon it. We were lucky enough to find rooms at one of the hotels, given that many people already lost their homes and also needed places to stay. This hotel was...
Hold on, Mr. Kozak. My producer's telling me that our other guest has arrived and is heading in to join us. I wasn't sure if she would make it in time.
Oh yes, very good.
The second guest audibly enters the booth, not offering a greeting at first. There is a brief but uncomfortable pause where she may be sizing up Mr. Kozak in some way. Notably, during this silence we also have our first anomaly, though it's nothing more than a couple seconds of static and buzzing that no one else seems to pick up on. It is not the sound of poor signal reception. I haven't met our second guest before, Manny tells the audience. But Mr. Kozak asked for her to join us tonight. Actually, it was one of his conditions. She wasn't the easiest person to get a hold of, and I don't know about her enough to really offer a proper introduction. So, if you'd please... She lets out a slightly agitated sigh and replies,
I'm Moira Burke.
Hello, Moira. Can you face the microphone when you speak so we can all hear you? And tell everyone at home what it is that you do.
I write books about personal spiritualism and practice Wicca myself.
With your black shawl and a name like Moira, that seems appropriate. Would you say that you're part of the New Age, mind-body kind of thing? Movement?
Something like that, I suppose. But there's nothing new about it to me.
Now, I'm not sure if Mr. Kozak asked for you to either refute or support his claims of some manner of summoning, but do you know him at all? Is there any history between the two of you?
I know of him and the group he was part of, though I was born 20 years after they disbanded. It's all nonsense, and their premise was as flawed as their process. His people were never going to prove or even find anything. Approaching the realm of the supernatural from a scientific angle will never get a positive result, and bundling together ethereal beliefs with silly things like fairies and leprechauns is actually rather insulting. If they stayed with one village in the old country and truly learned to understand the people and their customs while opening their hearts and minds to the possibility of other forms and interpretations of mysticism, then, just maybe, they would have had the transformative experience they were desperately seeking.
Miss Burke, please spare me your neo-paganistic prattle. I asked for you because you have the degree of conviction that I wanted to see, in someone who could confidently debate me about my experience. Our host is here to guide a story and entertain his audience, but I also wanted an honest conversation with a worthy opponent.
Why do you need me to provide that for you? Do you think I have experience making summoning circles in the woods and chanting until some ghoul emerges from a fire?
No, not at all. But before I die, I have to know if what we all saw and felt that night was real. If there is even a possibility. I'm the only one left. I was the youngest by a number of years, yes, but my colleagues, they all met untimely ends, one after the next, after only a couple of decades or so. My questions, doubts, and fears have lingered with me for so long. Now, to be honest, you aren't the first, and maybe not the last person I've asked to tear apart my story. Only the latest. I've realized that my time is running out, and I may not find the affirmations in my lifetime. But through radio, the story can persist. Should we find no answers tonight? Then, someone else could, one day.
I take it you've spoken with a variety of people then. Fine.
Yes, please proceed, Mr. Kozak. Though against my nature as a talk radio host, I'll try to keep any interruptions at a minimum.
I will do the same. I'll listen, so long as you don't insult my intelligence or ideology.
I'll try not to.
Kozak clears his throat and breathes in heavily.
We were in Clinton Square, surrounded by beautiful 20th century modern architecture, and on a quest to find a place for the night before we all froze to death. The Hotel Syracuse, unfortunately, was fully booked.
Built in 1924, nearly 800 rooms. Charles Lindbergh visited it. Manny shows off his knowledge of local history. Not in the greatest shape at the moment, but Hilton is restoring it, so we'll see how that works out. Sorry, Mr. Kozak, just trying to set the stage a bit here. Golden era of hotels, the 1920s.
That's quite all right. I was about to paint a picture as well, even if it was not right where we ended up. No, that would be a few blocks away on the edge of Clinton Square, right on Erie Canal, a forgotten hotel, having opened in 1925 and small in comparison at just 5 stories. But its lobby, no less glamorous. They were trying their hardest to compete, I believe. We did get to see the Syracuse's lobby, but we were informed of the no vacancy.
What was this other hotel called?
Hotel Erie Canal.
Oh, original. Hadn't heard of that one.
Few have. With good reason. Our original idea was to treat ourselves to the Plaza Hotel in New York City, but the weather ruined those plans. After traveling across this country and often staying at the most ramshackle of lodgings, we wanted to see the best America could offer before departing. And while we couldn't secure any rooms at the Syracuse, the Erie Canal seemed just as lovely. Quieter as well. No expense was spared on its lobby, and its marble tile so clean and polished that it was almost like walking on a mirror. Even its smoking lounge, the kind of room which we had our most relaxed yet stimulating conversations, was like a place only royalty would get to see only a few decades prior. I'm still surprised they let us and our ragged old suits into the building.
Okay, I have to know. Did anything seem off right away? Did anyone in your group sense, well, a presence?
Not right away. But then again, we were just trying to get out of the cold that first night. We wouldn't have been looking or paying attention.
I only ask because I just read this new book, The Shining, and phew, it makes me look at these fancy lodgings in a different way. Like they could be hiding horrific or horrifying secrets and histories. So, nice place then?
Aesthetically. But its, let's call them quirks, began to show by the second day of our stay. While warming myself by the fire in the lobby, I noticed how some potential guests not many, but a few, would either turn away at the building entrance or make it to the desk only to decide not to stay. Like they were attuned to something most people were not, and the hotel was giving them a bad feeling. I thought little of it at the time, seeing as how...
If anyone was picking up bad vibes from this building, it should have been those in your group.
Yes, but for us, it felt welcoming, almost beckoning. A well-lit and warm place to stay on a cold night. And there was more. Things that couldn't be overlooked by our grateful and rested minds. The electrical issues, for one. The lights in the hallways flickered constantly. And the radio in the smoking lounge. Poor reception on all stations. Except for one. I might be misremembering this, and it sounds like a horror story embellishment, but the only station that came in clearly played nothing but old ballroom music. That was it. Never even an announcer, as far as I could tell. No identification. Other lodgers would find the music, let it play for several minutes just to hear something come in clearly, and then seemed to become annoyed or perturbed enough to shut it off.
Okay, that's a little strange. Anything else?
The lights and radio we could ascribe to the building being new and in need of fixing. But then there was, well, I and a few others in our group had bizarre nightmares that resulted in poor sleep. Floorboards creaked on their own while we were in our beds. I'd wake up to the sound of the lobby's phone ringing off its hook, ignored by the night manager. I got up twice and went downstairs, only to have it fall silent when I reached the lobby. And though our lodgings felt warm, we would wake up to find cold frost on the room's side of the windows.
Uh-huh. So it must have occurred to everyone that after all your searching, maybe a haunted place had found you.
Yes, but it took us 3 days to even realize it. We'd been so exhausted from our travels that we had sort of shut down by then. We only wanted to rest. No more intellectual debates, no more searching. But on the third morning, at the height of the blizzard, when we were trapped inside, it dawned on our rejuvenated psyches that we may have stumbled onto something.
I find this all very hard to believe. All these flourishes and cliches. Should I assume that you eventually try an exorcism?
I'm doubtful that a priest would have come out in such weather. I haven't gotten to the strangest of the building's anomalies. There was a kind of attraction to a certain location. A pull on small, light objects throughout the hotel. It's something our mentalists picked up on within a day of our visit. At first, we thought perhaps the structure was tilted, had a bad foundation. The staff was already aware and considered it little more than a nuisance. They assured us that they'd used a level tool in various areas and determined that there was no tilt. We considered magnetism, but the effect was seen in objects with no metal. Pens would roll, papers would drift, abandoned luggage carts would move on their own in the hallways. Given enough hours in the day, even the blankets in our rooms would form ripple-shaped waves in their fabric. One of us, who had sensitive, senses, sometimes lost her balance while walking in certain directions. Whether in the lobby or on the floors above, anything that could be easily moved was tugged towards an invisible focal point inside the hotel. We centered our investigation around this peculiarity. And while our compasses were useless, their needles merely spun around while inside, we used other very light items to find the gravitational phenomenon, I guess you could call it. It was one of the corners of the lobby's lounge. Not a guest or utility room behind the corner, or some place in the ceiling or floor, but the corner itself, a forgettable spot where two walls meet and in plain view of anyone in the nearby chairs. In hindsight, it should have been more obvious. The flames from the fireplace all bent toward that corner as well. as if there were a draft. We studied the corner, and I imagine appeared to be out of our minds to the other guests as we did so. It was covered in off-white wallpaper, with a faint brocade pattern, above a walnut baseboard. I can still see it today, the memory sharper than the rest of the hotel. There was gloom in that corner. There wasn't something alive there, in any sense of the word. No ghost anchored to the spot, no emanating strange energy. Rather, it held a lack of anything. A negative space. The others offered up theories and words like doorway, void, or forgotten emptiness. The most scientifically studied of us suggested an area of frozen entropy, and, potentially, a portion of non-Euclidean space from a higher dimension leaking into our reality. I can see how you might say we were desperate to find anything at all before we went home, and we were experiencing some sort of collective folly, but I did genuinely feel something.
Well, what was it?
I wish I were smart enough to tell you, or had some big observation to share about the corner. Well, actually, there is one thing. If you looked at the space for, I'm not sure, more than a minute or so, your eyes would start to hurt. I'd compared it to being out for too long on a beach on a sunny day. It's not so much the burning on your retinas, but that dull ache that feels like it's coming from behind or around your eyes.
The eye needs something to focus on. It will stress or tire if you're looking at a wall for too long. Do you really expect anyone to believe this? Some strange corner in Syracuse. Honestly.
Please, go on. I want to see where this is going.
I'm coming up on the end, actually. I've already talked about the anomalies, and we recorded them all. Well, there's one last major one, but I'll get to that. The only thing really left to talk about is what we did. We don't have a standard ritual, but when we truly investigate something as deeply as we can together, and are each giving it our everything, a ritual does usually seem to take shape, organically. We look at all aspects of an anomaly, feel it, talk about it, theorize, open our minds to the possibilities of the universe. We'd absorb every detail of a place, sense its very nature. It's not much different than traditional rites performed by any religious or pagan group throughout history. But whereas they may have a structure, sheet music, if you will, we flowed like jazz, making it all up as we went along, adapting, bouncing off each other.
Maybe that's why you're yet to discover anything.
There was no plan, no set schedule. The incident was impromptu, and it began with me. I awake to the distant but piercing sound of the lobby phone ringing once again. Dim moonlight is coming into my room through the window frost. I take out my pocket watch and check the time in the darkness. Miss Burke, you may appreciate this. What time do you think I had?
Oh, I'm going to guess 3:33 a.m. The witching hour, naturally.
You're overdoing it with the cynicism, but yes, that's correct. I am determined to answer the phone this time, knowing it may be my last chance to do so. I throw on my slippers, race downstairs to avoid the slow elevator, and manage to put the receiver of the lobby desk's old candlestick phone to my ear. It's nearly dead silent on the other end. Nearly. When I listen closely, I can just hear the sound of a faint wind. Then, nothing. Well, I think, I'm already up and wide awake. I might as well see what the ground floor is like in the middle of the night. No manager appears to be on duty. I can explore the dark stillness all by myself. It's not entirely quiet, though. I hear the radio playing softly from the smoking lounge. I make my way there, feeling the walls for guidance. The windowless room would be pitch black if not for the soft, warm glow of the radio's vacuum tubes. I can hear the music a little better, but I can't identify the song. It's like nothing I'd ever heard before. I shuffle up to the large, elegant cabinet and turn the volume knob to the right, being careful not to bump the finicky unit and lose the station.
For close to 10 seconds, Kozak hums a delightful little tune. Then he moves on to the lyrics, which are simple and direct, like most songs were back then. But back when exactly? Hearing this after all these years and with an adult's ears sent a small shiver down my body. It also made me remember something else about the night of the broadcast. Around this point, a heavy fog began to roll in across Syracuse, and I could suddenly no longer see more than a few feet out of my second-floor bedroom window as I listened to the song.
There's just one place for me near you. It's like heaven to be near you. Time when we're apart, I can't face my heart. Say you'll never stray. Tried as I might, I couldn't recall most of the lyrics after that night. At least, not until I heard the song again, years later.
That's impossible.
Moira can be heard murmuring. Another anomaly here. With the audio tuned up, several seconds of the piano tune at the beginning of the actual song can be heard in the broadcast. No one at the studio acknowledges this, as usual. That's, wow, Mr. Kozak. That was a popular song in 1947. I'm gonna give you the benefit here and assume you're not pulling my leg or misremembered what you heard later in life, and ask how you think that might be possible.
To be frank, I'm still not entirely sure. I told the others, of course, once they were all awake and down in the lobby, but the radio had long gone quiet by then. It never should have been on in the first place, since no one was normally broadcasting at that hour. I didn't think much of it at the time, though. I just assumed it was some new American song I was unfamiliar with. It wasn't until nearly 20 years later, when the rest of the world had a chance to hear it, did I get into contact with the few surviving members of the group and tell them. That was the song I heard back then. All we could really say about it was that if some part of that lobby could warp space and reality the way it did, then maybe it was not such a stretch to say that it also distorted time. Pulled in, if nothing else, signals from another period. It's confounding, but I assure you, true.
And why was everyone in the group suddenly awake and downstairs?
Oh, none of us could sleep. I was already awake before this happened, but the others all began to suffer intense headaches that woke them, yet cleared shortly thereafter. And then they felt some sort of calling to go into the lobby. In a way, they had all been invited. Something wanted to meet us.
Something?
It knew we had been looking for it, sensing it. Now it was making its presence felt. To meet. To study us. The lobby was as cold as the weather outside, and the shadows of the dark room intensified, twisted, coalesced. An expert on folklore gave us the name of an obscure, nearly forgotten entity once said to dwell in the abandoned castles and manors in Eastern Europe. The Girik.
The... what now? Could you spell that out for the audio record? We wouldn't want our demon to be forgotten entirely, right?
The entity wasn't actually some mythical, fictional creature, but we started calling it as such, and the name stuck. Beasts in old folklore seem so tame in comparison to the horrors our minds have dreamed up in the modern age. Sure, maybe they lure away your child, give you bad luck, burn down your house. But concepts like corrupt the fabric of reality didn't exist yet. Giruk, Giruk, with a diaresis over the U. A vile demon that stalked its victim at night and invaded their dreams while enchanting the objects of the residents with foul magic. A fitting name from the old world, if ever there was one.
Interesting. Always a new fantastical creature to learn about. So, you're all in the lobby, middle of the night? How did you...
I'll tell you.
Kozak interrupts, and there's a subtle shift in his tone that makes it sound like he's suddenly the one in control.
But, Mr. Willem, first, I'd like us all to start being honest. You aren't sick. You've only coughed half a dozen times during this entire show. A typical smoker's cough. You're retiring for different reasons. I didn't know why when I first arrived, but I've been scouring your office and your vehicle parked out front as well.
What? What are you talking about? Scouring? Like, searching, you mean? What, you have some hired goons tearing apart my office right now?
No, Mr. William. I did say I was the one who had been looking around this decrepit old radio station, and I'd like to tell you how. You see, I wanted Miss Burke here for a specific reason. She and I share a very rare talent. Don't we, Moira? Come now. Don't look at me like you have no idea what I'm talking about. You sensed there was something strange about me since you first stepped into the booth. You couldn't see me, but I can see you. I can hide my inner self.
Miss Burke, what's he going on about? Manny pushes through his own confusion. Moira, are you okay? Stanislaw, what the hell did you do to her?
No. Oh, God. What is that?
Moira, what do you see? There's nothing there. Folks at home, there's something happening here that I can't explain. Miss Burke looks deeply afraid, and she's staring at the space above and behind Mr. Kozak. But I don't know what...
I revealed myself. She has been studying me all night, thinking that I couldn't see her staring. She knew we shared a talent. Or else, why would she have spent the night projecting part of herself, waiting for me to do the same? Only my other half has been here all along.
That thing isn't human. Unholy abomination.
Moira screams and can be heard scrambling to her feet and running to the door, and then struggling with it.
Let me out! Unlock it and let me the hell out of here!
Moira, those doors don't have locks. What's going on in there? Would one of you just explain it to me? Manny shouts.
Astral projection, Mr. Willem. She and I both have a rare ability. Perhaps among the only truly mystical, supernatural gifts in this otherwise cold, dead, and lonely world. Surely, a man such as yourself doesn't need a lecture on the concept.
No, it's a load of bull. Come on, of all the possibilities, aliens, ghosts, demons, even telekinesis, I'm open to all of that. But some living power to leave your own body? Float around and return to it? Nah, no way. And you both want me to believe that you can do it while awake? While having a conversation? Christ, Moira, calm down. I don't know what's wrong with the door, but you aren't trapped in there. I'll break the glass if I have to.
Yes, Miss Burke. Settle down. Don't be intimidated by the appearance of my projected self. It is fully under my control.
What do you mean, under your control? Is that not your spirit? That dark, haggard, monstrous shadow? No healthy person's consciousness would look like that.
It's complicated, my dear. Now please, return to your seat. I don't mean you any harm. I had to reveal myself, so that you could understand the rest of my story. And, I believe, before you'd start taking it seriously to begin with.
I don't know what to believe. But maybe I should apologize to both of you for my biases. There are a few things I've always just laughed off. Tarot cards, astrology, astral projection.
And yet, you must want to hear how the story ends even more now, don't you?
Yes, continue, please. You said you were almost at the end?
I need to apologize as well, Mr. Willem. You see, while it's true that I was reporting on the group and its activities, it wasn't an embedded position for some independent agency. I'd always been one of them. I'd write puff pieces and exaggerate findings to keep management and the other groups in good spirits. And they were all aware of my ability. I never sought a leadership position, but as the only one able to astral project on our organization, at least that we knew of, I was seen as something of an ace in the hole, so to say. If I couldn't see a spirit or some other layer of reality while we visited a place, then what we were looking for did not exist, and we knew to stop wasting our time and move on.
But how do you do that while talking to me?
We learn how to. It's like sending 20, maybe 30% of yourself out into the world, but keeping it tethered to you. The physical self responds a little slower, needs more time to think, but it's not too noticeable. I just never knew there were others like me. I've been searching for so long. I was born with the gift and never really questioned it.
And Mr. Kozak, did you use your gift to see another layer of reality, as you call it, in that hotel lobby? Was there more happening in that building that only you were aware of?
Much more. I felt something the moment we stepped into the building. No projection necessary. Once I had a chance to explore the lobby while I slept and could see it through a psychic lens, unconstrained by my physical self, some minds may call the room a portal to hell, or a gateway to a realm of chaos. But in my eyes, it was closer to a place where the walls of our reality had been breached, allowing the domain of the divine to merge with it. I can't say how long the hotel had been that way, or why it happened, but at some point, a tear in our world opened in the corner, and a weed invisible to most people began to spread throughout the lobby. Eventually, the growth was substantial enough to support a being from another plane, if only barely.
Our demon, right? What do you mean by barely?
I believe its existence was so slight and tenuous that it came to rely on the objects in the lobby. It anchored to the walls and ceiling, too weak to move freely through the air. The Giddick dreamed, and its unwieldy power caused the poltergeist-like mischief noticed by guests and staff. I sensed it, but the others could not. At first, I didn't interfere. I wanted to give the others their chance to discover and study the entity. And yet, though they were my friends and intelligent, I always knew their actual supernatural potential was negligible. We had finally found a truly anomalous location, and they had no ability to investigate or prove it. That night, I chose to give them what they had earnestly been searching for, if just to return to them some feeling of wonder for the world. If I could show them their miracle, they'd have belief again, a conviction to continue their pursuits. So, I lit the lounge fireplace and persuaded everyone to perform a seance, which was a rarity, as we never really considered the ritual effective in any way. I saw my intentions as good, but we know how that often turns out.
That it was you alone that brought out this Garuk. While everyone was in some meditative trance and trying to talk to a ghost, you left your body and then what? Did you see it?
I didn't know what I was doing at first, but I could see the spots and objects that the entity was chained to. Solid. Some things that could house its weak, scattered parts of a whole. The lobby telephone, a trash can, a lounge chair, and a potted plant. The base of a marble pillar. Several of the letters in the boxes behind the desk. Crystals in the chandelier. They all glowed in a soft, warm, and inviting light. I had seen all this on previous nights, but resisted the urge to touch the little embers of, let's call them spectral energy. So, I did. I felt one of those embers with my invisible fingers, and it leapt into my out-of-body self, danced around, and explored my consciousness like a curious firefly. Embarrassing as it is to admit, it rather tickled, but also gave off a sense of euphoria, a high I'd never felt before. And the more bits and pieces of that shattered soul I collected, the better it felt. They converged and grew, and I could soon hear soothing whispers, indistinct words of comfort and happiness that uplifted my worn and jaded spirits. I felt alive again, hopeful, in ways that I hadn't since before I fought in and saw the horrors of the First World War.
You just went and gathered them up. You already admitted that you had no idea what you were doing, no concern for the danger. Did you even take a moment to think it over? Or were you too curious about what it'd feel like to become a vessel for some eldritch nightmare?
You couldn't understand. That elation, that bliss it made me feel. I know, you want to say that it manipulated me into servitude, but perhaps not. I may have merely experienced the same excitement it felt, towards its sudden chance to escape a prison and become whole. Of all the places in the world, it beat the odds when someone with our kind of gift stepped into its den.
Or it could be that it was coaxing you towards it your entire life. You help a being that is beyond us, some unknowable thing with evil intent.
Do you call anything that you cannot understand evil?
It's obvious where this story is headed, and I already feel his presence in this room. Some part of it either remains in your being or follows you all these years later. I can see you for who you are, Mr. Kozak. You bathe deeply in a well of the profane. What you let loose into this world doesn't need a name or to be defined. Now, I don't know how you're doing it, but open the goddamn door.
Miss Burke, my producer is working on that right now from the other side. If you listen, you can hear him. He'll use a power drill and remove the hinges if it comes to it. And regardless of what Mr. Kozak did 50 years ago, this may be his last and only chance to get his story out into the world. I feel obligated to let him finish. So long as he isn't a threat.
Defensive, aren't you, Mr. Willem? I know you have a revolver in your desk. Like I said, I've looked through the entire building. Tell me, have you threatened to shoot one of your guests before? Or are you so worried about something you feel like you need self-defense wherever you go?
For the first time that night, Manny sounds agitated. Look, Stanislaw, enough with the parlor tricks. Do you want to tell us how this ends or not?
I do, but the details are rather grisly.
This is a late-night, poorly rated radio show, and I'm retiring minutes from now. I doubt the FCC gives a damn.
Very well, then. Once I had absorbed enough of the spots of light, the rest came to me on their own, no matter the distance. For a brief instant, I felt an indescribable surge of pain, and my projected self changed. My arms, which by all means did not exist outside of my body, suddenly became visible. I looked at them in abject terror. They appeared as twisted ghostly limbs, with gnarled fingers and monstrous claws. Hardly a moment later, I was forced back into my body. I broke out of my trance, so startled that I screamed, waking the others from the seance. But Then I felt numb, empty. My essence was still out of my body, and yet I was somehow conscious, in an empty vessel of muscle and bone. My friends would have wondered why I screamed the way I did, would have asked me about it out of concern. But my reasons didn't matter, because what they immediately saw made everyone react in a similar way. The lobby was now home to a translucent creature, visible to us all. It howled in agony, its body twitching as its gaunt legs tried to find steady footing. Like it had been birthed into our world, fully grown within seconds. I can't tell you what was new to it, what caused it such pain and confusion. Sound, light, gravity? For a moment, we gawked at it. A barely defined bipedal shape, glowing in a blinding light. It stumbled about, thrashing as its existence was formed, or translated into something our world could recognize. A single wild slash of its claws cut so deeply, swiftly, and cleanly into a marble pillar that it was as if stone had been erased entirely. The others believed this was our doing, that it was us who actually let in a creature. They were so dumbfounded, and myself shocked at what I'd done, that we didn't seem to acknowledge the peril. As it shrieked loudly enough to wake the entire building, a single errant swipe nearly cut one of our skeptics in two. Oh, the blood. It covered everything. The sight was enough to get us on our feet, but we had no plan for anything like this. As the entity took a proper, defined shape, I believe most of us felt a divine fear and primal urge to look away. Like our unconscious minds knew our lives were in great danger. I'm unsure whether to call it a morbid irony or coincidence, or if they simply didn't perceive the fear the rest of us did, but it was our remaining two skeptics that also died that night. Everyone else had scattered before they hit the floor, and when we returned for them later, blood covered their frozen faces. We attributed their cause of death to looking at the being's visage for several seconds too long, or for any time at all. The coroner had no answers other than massive cerebral hemorrhage. The man nearly cut in half they could not explain. But we were cleared, given the nature of the attack. No person could do this. So, a violent, yet unexplained, end.
Grief. And where did the Garuk go after the massacre?
I haven't seen it take physical form since that night. What I can tell you is that I believe it is unable to sustain a coherent, singular body in our world. I saw its full self for only an instant, in a burst of light that filled the room. Then it split in two, like an unstable isotope that only exists for a fraction of a second. Half of the creature remains in that lobby, still bound to it. The other half...
You carry it with you, is that right?
So, you believe the story?
I don't know. I'm just trying to keep up on what you said.
The power went out after the flash of light. Everything stopped working. Somehow, even the boiler in the basement. In such cold, and with a gruesome triple homicide to be investigated, the building was evacuated. Our colleagues laid there, covered by blankets, in the dark, as people fled. Guests were transported to the other hotels, the hospital, fire stations, wherever had space. Hotel Erie Canal never reopened. And the survivors of my group returned to our homelands, with little appetite for seeking out further mysteries. News of the incident was suppressed, and a gas leak was the official cause of the hotel's closure. In 1937, I left Europe and immigrated to America. I returned to Syracuse to find the building demolished, a vacant lot, leaving no trace. What became of the lobby and the creature chained to it, I never found out for certain. But I did speak with some people who remembered those days after the blizzard. They described government vehicles always parked outside, no entry for anyone, and, weeks later, a constant flow of military trucks, each filled with covered pallets. I think they gutted the lobby, took it away piece by piece, to bury it, burn it, maybe even rebuild it elsewhere. Who can say?
But just to be clear, one half of the thing we're calling a Garuk is still a part of you? Like a parasite? Something attached to your very consciousness?
The relationship became symbiotic over time, once the life-threatening fevers and indescribable nightmares ended. The being I share my body with understands that I'm a vessel it can use to interact with our physical world, and when I sleep, it ventures out to do whatever it is it wants to do. I don't ask many questions concerning its motivations. In return, it amplifies my power to project, and, perhaps, has given me my longevity. Though I can't prove that.
Absurd.
Moira can be heard grumbling just as the muffled sound of a power drill working on the unmovable door hinges becomes audible.
All of it.
Well, Manny exhales mightily. That was quite a tale to end on. Folks, as always, you choose what to believe. Try to research Hotel Erie Canal, if it was even real, and come to your own conclusions. Okay, we still have some show left, so let's give Miss Burke time to respond, maybe ask Mr. Kozak a few questions, and share a few theories on just what the hell the Garuk could have.
Mr. Wellham, you're forgetting something. Or stalling until 1 in the morning. I can't tell which. You wouldn't want to leave your show with a dangling thread. Don't you want to know what else I saw while exploring this station? There are some interesting things hidden about your office.
Respectfully, no. We're done with that, Mr. Kozak. You tell a fine story and even had me going for a bit there, but I don't personally believe that a part of you has been flying around here like a ghost all night. The revolver was a lucky guess, or someone told you about it. Everyone at the building knows I own one, including my producer, who should be joining us any second now.
Mr. Willem, this man is dangerous. As soon as that door comes down, I'm leaving. And you should too.
Come on, Miss Burke. What's he gonna do to me from the booth? Sick his invisible pet on me? Take me out like the other skeptics?
You don't want to talk about what I saw hidden in your desk.
Kozak says calmly as he retakes control of the show.
I get it. I'm not out to destroy your reputation, and I won't tell your listeners what I found. But it was hardly a surprise when I saw your ticket for a flight that leaves for Europe first thing in the morning. In a hurry to get out of the country, aren't you?
You have no idea what you're...
The truth is, Mr. Willem, I don't care about your vices and possible crimes. I've hidden my secret for so long, I only wanted the satisfaction of getting someone to believe in my ability. And my distant past. I really came here tonight for one main reason. I'm getting on in age, my body is frail, and before I die, I'd like to be able to dream again. I had you bring Miss Burke to me so that I could pass on the Giddick to another. To someone who can give it a home. If not to keep it from wandering about alone and wreaking untold havoc, then just to preserve the only miraculous thing left in this world.
Stay away from me. That demonic leech of yours is going to die with you, old man.
All right, enough, Manny shouts, and can be heard banging on the glass that separates the booths. Pete, get that door off already. You need a crowbar or something, man? What's taking so long? Just hold on, Mora. We'll have you out of... His tone suddenly shifts to one of horror and confusion as his focus must have returned to his guests. Oh God, what the hell is that? What the hell is that thing? Pete, the door, now! Kozak lets out one last remark, though his voice is strained and nothing about what is happening is explained.
You still don't understand. You were never tonight's host. Look at that. Isn't it a sight to behold?
What transpires next does so over the course of just 9 seconds. The 3, briefly 4 characters in our story shout over each other, and along with the bizarre and distorted sounds from inside the booth that are blowing out the audio levels, it is difficult to put into text exactly everything that is said. But I've given my best shot and have tried to piece it together visually. Whatever it is that Manny sees, it is scaring Moira half to death, as she can be heard shrieking and banging on the door to freedom. It sounds like it is pulled open a moment later, and the sound of some solid metal, likely the aforementioned crowbar, can barely be made out when it hits the floor. The show's manager, Pete, is heard shouting a few panicked expletives of his own upon realizing he's just feet away from an unnatural, monstrous being. And somehow, the lights in the building all go out at the same time, even while the broadcast continues. This can be timed via another screen from Moira, and both Manny and Pete are yelling out, "What happened to the lights?" followed by, "All across the damn station," and "Backups aren't working." A second later, the glass between the 2 booths shatters. Manny shouts in pain. It's unclear who or what broke it. And then nothing. Silence. I don't remember hearing it as a kid, but with modern audio enhancers, I was able to bring out some formerly inaudible manic whispers. The words are indecipherable and might be in another language, but it's clearly a chant of some kind. They don't sound like they're coming from anyone we've heard all night. A steady electric hum fills the studio's otherwise dead air. After several minutes, I stopped listening. Or rather, I did as a kid. Among all the other things my younger self had to have been thinking about, I must have figured that the show had ended early. Part of me wishes I could go back and tell that kid to keep listening, but it's probably better that I didn't. Out of curiosity and seeing the audio waveform grow again, I kept listening this time. 6 minutes and 11 seconds of dead air. Did no one else notice? Did any of the listeners call the station to check on Manny? Surely, many of them had to have thought it was an elaborate prank. Mr. Willem going out in style? But still, someone would have noticed that shit wasn't right. Since the lights went off, though, it's easy to assume the phone lines were down as well. After those 6 minutes of nothing, I heard someone stir. Then a few coughs out of Mr. Kozak. Had everyone at the station been knocked out, put to sleep? Were some of them dead? If only there were some visual recordings of what happened. The audio leaves much to the imagination. Wake up. Wake up, girl. Growls a slow, deformed version of his voice. Like something else deep inside of him is pushing boiling air through his throat. Your gift awaits. Moira can be heard murmuring, desperate, weak pleas perhaps. All of these years, and I never even knew if anyone had survived whatever darkness befell the station. Until now. And this is why I'm glad I didn't have to grow up with the following sounds haunting my childhood nights. Because the next thing I hear, after a few guttural groans and pained huffs from Kozak, are bones breaking, muscle ripped apart. It's sickeningly moist, akin to a cantaloupe gradually being torn open.
Oh, God! No! You told me it wouldn't hurt! Stop! Please, stop!
It isn't seen often, even in horror media. But one of the things that really disgusts me to the point of almost skipping a scene is when a creature burrows its way out of a person, or or somehow breaks out of their skin like it's wearing a suit. It's vile. The pain would be unimaginable. The thought that some squirming, parasitic life form has been living inside your flesh all along is bad enough.
You aren't supposed to be alive like that.
Kozak's weak voice still comes through in chokes, likely originating from the floor by this point. He lets out several grunts, each more pathetic than the last. And then all falls quiet. Other than the repulsive sounds of something fleshy emerging from his body, it can be heard crawling on the floor, scraping about as it tries to find its footing. I can't tell how big it is or what it looks like. Is it soaked in blood? Are its muscles exposed, or is it skeletal? Whatever it is, it's my opinion that it can't last for long in a physical form. Maybe only for the few moments it needs one. The abomination lets out a guttural growl, then a gasping sound. It seems to mutter something in its incomprehensible language, and then it too goes silent. The moment its body dies, the signal devolves into a chaotic, noisy mess of static and electrical interference that wanes and grows in intensity like ocean waves over the course of several minutes. A spectrogram readout of this interference is mostly a solid color, though, ominously, there are a few rather claw-shaped readings at certain frequencies. Nothing the ear could discern. Once the interference finally clears, there is another minute of silence before Moira can be heard groaning listlessly. She seems to stand herself up and shuffle off without a word, despite being surrounded by carnage that we have no description of. She might still feel like herself, albeit delirious. Or if what Mr. Kozak said about his parasite is true, she may be asleep or unconscious and the Garuk is in full control. If she is still alive, she dropped off the face of the earth following the night's events. If she isn't, and this is all real and not the greatest radio play ever concocted, I'm worried she passed on the demon to someone else out there, and we have no idea who the victim might be. Silence again. In the last few seconds, with the door removed and the glass shattered, we hear distant sirens. Then, without anyone to give a proper send-off, we hard transition right into a switch over to BBC News. The tape ends shortly afterwards. While listening to the last moments of the show that I didn't know existed for over 40 years, I was frozen by a mixture of emotions. Fear, the primary one. Even for something that was separated from the present by so much time. There is a cover story I looked up before I searched for the tape, just so that I could confirm I hadn't hallucinated the whole thing. Officially, Pete, the producer, had a heart attack during the show after reacting to a horrific electrical accident that killed one guest and left another in a state of shock. Not my words. Blame newspaper headlines from the 1970s. And Manny? Still missing to this day. He could have gotten out of there and out on his flight to a new life, whether or not he was injured by breaking glass. Or maybe he did die that night as well, and we aren't allowed to know it. We also have no clue what his nefarious secret was, and I doubt we ever will. So, again, I see two possibilities here. It was either a live hoax gone wrong that resulted in a gruesome accident, or this disturbing show was genuine. I don't think there's a happy ending where we were both pranked and everyone lived to laugh about it later. So, no good truths to be found in this story. And if the Garuk or whatever it was is real, then there might be two halves out there somewhere. Maybe they can't combine into one or don't want to. But if they reunited and found a way to exist in a stable state, what sort of creature would we be dealing with? Would it even have need for a host? Sorry, I'm probably jumping the gun here. I only wanted to share some lost media on Christmas, and not give you all existential dread about an otherworldly horror that probably doesn't exist. I still lean more towards the team skeptic myself, like the ones from about a century ago. Even so, I'm also not totally on board with there being nothing in this world beyond what we can measure. Make your own decisions. If you think it's all real, though, maybe don't go looking. It seems like the government would be aware of its existence and you could get yourself disappeared. Anyway, I'll find a place to upload the audio file and share it with everyone in a few days. Maybe see if I can borrow the other tapes and digitize the rest of the show. I don't think there are any hints to be found about the truth across the episodes. Still, they shouldn't fade into total obscurity. Thanks for the late night entertainment, Manny Willem. Signing off. The server and all of its contents were taken down only hours after the episode's audio was uploaded. The file has not been shared since, and no other copies of the show are currently confirmed to exist. A box of letters was recently discovered in a ghost town within the arid and chilly mountainous region of northern Colombia. These letters have likely gone unread for at least 3 decades. They are just a small part of a larger trove of records, correspondence, and personal journals concerning the events in a place where copper miners and their families once lived. The population peaked at about 1,000 people in 1930, but as the ore veins dried up, families left for the modernizing cities on the coast. In 1974, the country's revolutionary armed forces spread into the region, bringing their criminal operations and anarchic violence too close for comfort and signaling the end of a community. State records indicate that only a few dozen people remained in the town by 1985, and most of them seem to have been scavengers picking at the bones of the mines for any remaining metals. Working alone with crude tools, there came a point where more of the locals were dying or disappearing instead of leaving. However, there was one holdout of organized civilization that continued to exist until the very end. A small orphanage run out of an 18th century Catholic mission by Sister Liliana. She is young, born in 1960 according to her papers. The most important of the discovered letters detail what transpired in the last 2 months of 1986, revealing what almost became a forgotten story, covered up and nearly lost to time. In its wake are many questions, terrifying possibilities, and further possible incidents that have, as of now, gone undiscovered. Instead of saying too much on the outset, I've translated the most relevant letters sent between Sister Liliana and a state worker named Hernando Gomez, who at the same time was assigned to perform monthly welfare checks on the orphanage. He worked in the closest major city, over 60 miles away. Also mixed among the letters were responses from Sister Marta, an older friend and mentor from Liliana's convent. Letters sent to Sister Marta, who passed away several years ago, have yet to be found and may be lost. The mountain town did not have any phone service, meaning that nearly all communication went through what must have been a slow mail service. Presented in chronological order, I believe it best to begin with a request to the state from Sister Liliana, postmarked November 3rd, 1986.
Mr. Gomez, this is the third time I've asked to be transferred to a proper orphanage in a nearby city. I have been patient and dutifully continued my caretaking of the children this past year, but the situation is worsening here, and I am at my wit's end. The groundskeeper recently quit, leaving me with only 2 volunteer helpers that are far from dependable, and with colder weather on the way, I have even more reason to be concerned about the condition of a place that will no longer even be properly maintained. Please, no more red tape. Talk to whomever you need to and send us a bus as soon as possible. On your next visit, I hope to hear some good news for a change. I know that the partisan militia has reached deeper into the mountains, and I've heard stories of the roadblocks and bandit-like activity, but surely someone in the government isn't too afraid to send escorted transportation for the sake of these children. Or give us a helicopter if the roads sound too treacherous. If you and the mail can still come up here on occasion, surely you can bring me something larger that will seat 11 of us. And while I hesitate to complain about my important position, I feel that I should mention the tedium which has set in among the children. They've become quite the group of troublemakers. At the very least, please bring some more books to read, whatever you can find or might have on hand. The books we do have are in tatters, and we lost another one several days ago when Daniela ripped out its last remaining pages and burnt them using a stolen matchbook. If she had done it to find some heat in this drafty old building, I might understand. But I'm certain she only did it to entertain her rebellious friends. I wish you well, and take care.
A letter arrives from Sister Marta a few days later, before Mr. Gomez has had a chance to read this appeal. It's obvious that Sister Liliana had recently asked for advice or help from her mentor. It reads,
My dearest Liliana, I've always said that in times of trouble, God is either testing our worth, teaching us an important life lesson, or both. Reflect on the fact that those children, whether abandoned or having lost their families, rely on you no matter how they may treat you on a daily basis. One day, they will grow up and look back at your caretaking with gratitude. And I have faith that they'll become better people than these so-called freedom fighters attempting to overthrow this country. Be wary of them. I've heard from several of the other sisters that their attacks on civilians have included missionaries and even the local clergy. I fear that this world has gone mad. As you know, I've recently lost family of my own back in Romania. People cry out for freedom and think it gives them permission to harm the innocent or anyone with different points of view. There is always a bed here waiting for you, but those children and your work come first. Try not to fault Mr. Gomez. His department, like many government agencies, are either underfunded or suffer from corruption. You've made him out to sound like one of the good men who truly sympathizes with your plight, yet whose hands are tied and can't help in all the ways you wish he could. I doubt that the disciplinary incident that occurred several months ago is relevant to his inaction. Rest assured that I am still seeking out a bus and a driver for you, but it appears that there are few people in the city who are as capable and strong as you. Those misguided rebels have them scared. Until then, stay strong. Your tribulations will last only as long as you are meant to endure them and will prepare you all the better for future struggles.
Hernando's response to Liliana, written using a typewriter in the thinnest stationery his department could provide, arrived shortly thereafter. It is kept as pristine as all of the Lonely Sisters' other letters, despite what must have been a contentious relationship between the two.
Miss Ramiro, as always, I assure you that your voice has not gone unheard in these crowded offices. I do what I can for you, and hundreds of other needy citizens and public workers on each one of the 6 days of the week I come in and work for 12 hours. No, I'm not looking for pity or making excuses, but I felt it fair to remind you how busy and understaffed we are at this department. You haven't been forgotten, and I'm coming up to you in only a few days from now to check on the orphanage. If I can't bring a large vehicle to you by then, we will at least have a chance to talk face to face about your options. I wouldn't expect a helicopter to come and get all of you anytime soon. The government has its hands tied up in other matters even more than usual, thanks to gang violence of kids pretending to be freedom fighters. Your children, on the other hand, I can empathize with. It was never a town, if you can even call it one, made with them in mind. Exhausted, rugged copper miners who had nowhere else to go after a long workday than a bar with a brothel upstairs will inevitably result in unwanted little ones that grow into troubled adolescents. I don't wish to infer that we should give up on them. I'm sure that you could find a way out on your own and leave them behind, but you haven't done that yet, and I don't think you could live with yourself if you did. I'll end this letter with a word of advice, coming from a father of 3. To cool their tempers, promise them rewards for their good behaviors instead of punishing them for their misdeeds. Candy, old abandoned toys that might still be up there, whatever you can find. Do not escalate things. Despite what most people say, physical punishment of any kind does not work and only breeds resentment and mistrust. And don't ever burn any of their hands on the stovetop again. If I ever see that a second time, I really will have to report you for it. And I know it was just a mistake made during a fit of anger, and it would never happen again. But whenever I see such things happen with other caretakers, I can't help but remind them to do better in the future. Should an incident repeat, it looks bad for me too. I'll see you soon. Be well.
For some reason, an unsent letter to Sister Marta was found under her Nando's in the stack. Liliana wanted to let off some steam to her mentor and mentioned that she couldn't believe he was still bringing up the burning incident. But then she started rambling and treating the letter more like a diary, and likely realizing its uselessness, decided to keep the rest of her emotions inside and stop writing halfway. Though I wonder why she kept it. Around a week later, and following the visit from Hernando, Liliana sent another message to him and received one from Sister Marta. Both are concerning for different reasons.
Mr. Gomez, you saw firsthand how bad things are getting here on your recent visit. Even the food shipments are no longer reliable, and the scarcity is driving up prices to the point where I am feeding the children only the bare essentials, and no one wants to donate anything better to us. It can't be that hard to get some decades-old bus at the mountain to get us out. I'm starting to think it's more hopeless than just that. Is there no more room in the other orphanages? Anywhere in the country? I understand people not wanting to adopt and put more pressure on their families in this political climate, but all I'm asking for now is somewhere to stay. Maybe 10 children don't mean much to the rest of Colombia, but there is a crisis building regardless of the number. I apologize if I am even more forward than usual in this letter, and I can already see that my handwriting is messy from my anger and worry. Last night, I experienced terror. At some point early in the morning, I was awoken by the sound of truck engines. They were loud and shook the air, causing the children to stir. By some small miracle, I managed to keep them all in their beds as I investigated. I'm uncertain if it was from fear or divine guidance, but I didn't use a lantern on my way to one of the few windows in the mission that hadn't been boarded up, instead navigating by moonlight. Had I done so, the glow may have given myself away, and it's possible I would not have survived the ordeal that was brought into our small town. Thank God I also leave no lights on throughout the building at night. To the people that invaded us, our orphanage may as well have been an abandoned husk, unoccupied for years. It was those rebels, Mr. Gomez. I've asked others, but no one seems to know of their business here, or at least is too afraid to tell me. They arrived in 4 of their trucks and outpoured a dozen or so men, all heavily armed, yelling and barking orders outside of the tavern, the only establishment still open at that hour. I watched by the window, too afraid to move, as they went inside and came back out minutes later, dragging an older man named Ernesto across the dirt. I've seldom spoken with him and know little of his past, and couldn't begin to guess as to why they wanted him specifically. The rebels dragged the poor man to one of their trucks and tossed him inside the cabin. Several of the brutes fired their automatic weapons into the night air as a display of their perceived power, or as a warning, just before their trucks took off, the tires tearing apart our simple muddy streets. The men were in such a hurry that some of their belongings slid out of their vehicles during their exit and littered the street. I'm not sure what most of it is. It all looks like stolen equipment from somewhere, but I haven't gotten close enough to identify any of it, and everyone's been told not to come near the material. I suppose the others worry that the thieves will come back to reclaim it. So when dawn broke, it was all locked up in one of our 2 jail cells. They think if someone gets their hands on the equipment and tries to sell it, we might all be in danger when those men return. So we're holding the loot for criminals instead. I'm honestly losing faith in the people I once called neighbors. I don't know the purpose of this letter. Nothing will be done about any of this, and if anything, our latest incident will only make your people more hesitant to move us off of these foothills. But if the entire town disappears one day, you'll know what group of people was behind it.
And from Sister Marta, a short and simple response to a letter that may have been similar to the previous one left unsent.
Liliana, it is common for people to judge us for a wrong we have committed in the past. Others sometimes simplify a complicated life down to one mistake and believe it says everything about our character. But being upset with Mr. Gomez because he brought up something that happened with a stovetop and hands left unwashed for dinner will not help matters. All you can do is continue to pursue good deeds in your life and show him that you have changed for the better since then. Given time, he will no longer feel the need to judge you for it. Even so, I must insist that you continue to work on your weakness with your anger. Remember that you are passionate with pleasing others and showing compassion and empathy. But perhaps you expect too much reciprocity. In your position, a simple thank you for your work should be sufficient. Do not look for anything greater from your young charges. What do you wish them to offer you at their age? You have too great a need to be respected and shown gratitude, when you should be able to feel fulfillment on your own through your actions. Do not forget all that I taught you. Better days will come.
Having gone to a Catholic school myself, I'm well aware that many who serve the faith can have short fuses and pent-up, unfulfilled desires. Liliana was probably at a time in her life when she felt like she was wasting time in a place that was equally unforgiving, dull, and now dangerous. She felt trapped. It's understandable. I'm not important to this story, but I also grew up in that town and was Liliana's age in 1986, though I left with my family earlier on when it was starting to collapse. I was asked to help the investigation on what ultimately happened to be the place, and I was the one that found Liliana's stash of letters and helped decode them, as her handwriting is not easily legible. Mr. Gomez sent a response that isn't really worth copying over, in which he basically reminds Liliana of his limitations as a government employee and tries to reassure her once again that she hasn't been forgotten, this time adding that the presence of revolutionaries wouldn't deter any efforts to get her and the orphans out. It all comes down to logistical issues, he explains. But there was something about that night when they abducted Ernesto that changed everything in the dying town and began a chain of events that greatly hastened its demise. Likely seeing that her letters had achieved nothing so far, Liliana seemed to hesitate before penning her next one to Mr. Gomez, which reached his desk 2 weeks after his visit. Her descriptions of the occurrences that followed are quite detailed and disturbing. This is the first troubling letter in Mr. Gomez's files, and it's a wonder that they weren't passed on to someone higher up in government and classified sooner. He must have been unable to see the full picture of what was transpiring. It reads like a disaster report and has a tone of desperation right at the start when Liliana addresses him by his first name.
Hernando, a curse has come upon this town. Things were already so bad here that I hesitated to write simply to relay more of our troubles, which I'm sure you've heard more than enough about. But I can't ignore what's happening. 2 weeks have passed since your visit, and everything has gotten much worse. It started a few days after those misguided revolutionaries terrorized us. One after the next, and within the span of 24 hours, all of the children caught a vicious stomach bug. They couldn't hold down anything, not even warm broth. I thought maybe their room had gotten too cold one night and given them all a nasty chill, yet they haven't even complained about the lack of warmth like they usually do prior to their illness. Whatever had afflicted them passed quickly, lasting no more than 48 hours, although a few of the children showed sporadic symptoms for several days afterwards. One night they would be fine, and the next they'd be expelling acrid fluids before feeling all right again within hours. I'm sorry for using such a visual description, but the smell of sick lingers here in the air, to the point where you may get a whiff of it from this paper, so I thought it best to explain. Ill children I can manage, despite the accompanying sights, sounds and smells. I'm good at caretaking. If you recall me telling you, I was practicing to become a nurse until I lost my parents and finances and found myself owing a life debt to the convent for helping me get back on my feet. And perhaps it's terrible of me to say, but at least sick kids settle down for a time. I wouldn't be writing this letter if it stopped at a simple spread of a bug. A few days after they had recovered, the town's elderly owner of the general store became sick as well. Seriously so, from what I've heard. We lack a proper doctor here, forcing him to drive to the nearest city for care. He is known to be a bit of a grouch, especially when it comes to children, so I was disappointed but not surprised when the orphans seemed to take some delight in the news. How cruel they can be sometimes. Though, admittedly, when I was young, I also perceived certain adults as enemies and was pleased by their occasional misfortune. Kids can be like that, what with their narrow view of the world. It's sinful, but forgivable and teachable, I believe. However, it's what they did next that stretches the limits of forgiveness. God help me. These children snuck out one night and broke into the store, taking food and whatever else their grubby little hands could pilfer. Normally the owner is sleeping in his home directly above the shop, and he sleeps so lightly that he frequently wakes up and yells out his windows if there's the slightest commotion on the street. And the instant he's out of town, my children become brazen enough to steal from him, a sick man who provides for this community. I couldn't believe it when I found out. It was obvious that they were up to no good the next day, as they were acting like they had just gotten away with a scheme. Louis, the youngest, gave it all away when he came to dinner with chocolate smeared around his mouth. He falls apart when caught in a lie, and it didn't take me long to find their stolen stash of sweets, snacks, and everyday objects they must have considered close enough to being toys, since the store doesn't sell actual toys. I was livid, to say the least, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't even punish them at first. Doing so has never really worked. I just made them return everything that wasn't edible or that they hadn't opened yet. There was always one form of discipline that I've kept in my arsenal for just the right moment, and I thought about trying it after our visit to the store. I believed that if I put the children in a jail cell for an hour or so, they might have the chance to see a possible path that their lives were taking. But I wasn't given that option. When we went to the police station, I found our only 2 officers helplessly watching a group of men, roughneck former miners who think they run this town, as they carried off the stolen equipment that we had secured in the jail cell. They glared at me on their way out, as if they were annoyed at my presence, all while the children watched. "Don't judge us, sister," one of them said. "They aren't coming back for any of this. They've forgotten all about it by now." It's so easy to reason away our behaviour. I didn't ask what they were doing with any of those machines and tools. Going to another town to sell it, I suppose, for more money to waste on alcohol. And here I was, trying to teach these children a lesson on thievery. They must have only learned that if you're loud and threatening enough, you can take whatever you want. Though I did get a look at the material for the first time, I recognised most of it from my time at nursing school. It was all medical equipment. The revolutionaries must have broken into a hospital, whether it had been closed for years or was still open and operating. This would not come as a surprise. Those violent men act as shamelessly as my young wards. I hope you can look into this if you get a moment. I feel so powerless. The people here have given up, and I'm not sure how much longer the civility of this place will last. Just before I was about to drop off this letter this morning, more illnesses were reported. The mail truck will be arriving shortly, so forgive the hastiness of this edition. 2 men were found passed out in a gutter at dawn, apparently in a sort of stupor and feeling unwell. To put it bluntly, they are known as the town drunks, but it sounds like they were kind of in a worse state than usual. They show at Mass, no doubt to try and find weekly absolution, yet otherwise often cause trouble and have spent many nights in jail. They seem to loathe my children in particular and speak poorly of them, even in God's house on Sundays, and directly to their faces. The one place I bring them once a week to instill some structure in their lives, and they get called street rats, or worse. I won't weep for these men, and would call it divine punishment if it weren't for one of my aides finding herself stricken by this spreading plague as well. When she woke up yesterday morning, she felt feverish and complained of a burning sensation. Once it was clear that she was too weak to help me, I sent her home for some bed rest. She is elderly and short-tempered, and the children have never really cared for her. But what am I supposed to do now? The only person I have left assisting me is the woman who cooks the meals. I'm at my wit's end. Please get us off of this barren hill.
In response, Mr. Gomez replied with a short letter that must have frustrated her even more, yet also offered some degree of hope.
Sister Liliana, I've arranged for a doctor to visit you, the children, and the other locals in town. He'll be bringing a variety of medicines to hopefully control what seems to be an outbreak. You may ask how I manage this, yet can't pull off sending a bus to you. Well, it's simple. The doctor is an old friend and isn't scared of anything, so he didn't hesitate to agree to come to you. I'm confident he'll be able to help. Your information about the medical equipment is helpful. The police are investigating a possible incident, the nearest city to the town. They are also looking into Mesto, and I believe they're actively searching for him. I do have one piece of good news. Someone much higher up than I am finally took notice of your predicament and has assured me that he's working on a proposal that should reach President Varga's desk. It sounds too good to be true, but if the government feels like there's something to publicly gain by moving heaven and earth to bring all of you into civilization, they may just go through with some grand plan. So, don't give up yet. I'll be in contact as soon as I hear something. Take care.
A letter from Sister Marta was delivered at the same time.
Dear Liliana, remember that I am always praying for you during challenging times. I am certain that these illnesses will be overcome through both modern medicine and our faith. It may seem that God has forsaken you, but I know that isn't the case. It is natural to reach out and try to grasp at any easy solution when we struggle, and I understand the reasons behind your wishes. That said, I don't think it will be possible to convince a priest to come up there and consecrate the grounds. This is already an irregular request, and it wouldn't be done to rid an area of evil spirits. You should already know this. There are worldly reasons for disease and misfortune too. I hope that this care package helps you and the children. Please write back as soon as your situation changes in either direction.
The contents of the care package which came with the letter are lost to time. What we do know is that Mr. Gomez's final personal meeting with Liliana in the middle of December did not go well. She sends him a letter immediately afterwards, and her words are nearly indecipherable angry scribbles. She had to say some things that she didn't during the visit, needing the chance to properly defend herself.
I've taken a day to gather my thoughts before writing you again. But admittedly, I'm not very clear-headed. I will try to keep this from devolving into rambling incoherence, but I'm struggling to find the right words to explain how ridiculous all of this is, and I feel like I've had too many accusations lobbed at me to count. To begin with, of course I wasn't going to mention the burns on the children's hands in my previous letter. You'd have come up here with your mind already made up about me. But I made no attempt to hide the burns from you during your inspection. My own hand to God, I haven't hurt any of my wards since the first time I made that terrible mistake. Our cook fully attested as such. And furthermore, I would waste precious stove fuel to punish the children like that again, especially not when it did far more harm than good last time. And while your doctor was kind enough to refill our first aid kit and essential medicines, as someone with medical knowledge myself, I have to disagree with his assessment. He believes we've been afflicted by a common disease and recovery will come with proper bed rest, despite my insistence that I've never heard of such symptoms manifesting. Aside from a loss of appetite and fatigue, the burns on their palms and other areas of their bodies don't seem to be healing, despite first appearing weeks ago. The damaged skin is the worst on their hands, with coin-sized bright red marks appearing in various spots. I'd be tempted to compare it to a form of stigmata if I subscribed to the belief of such a supernatural occurrence. Included is a copy of the medical notes the doctor made for each child. I've asked so much of you already, but please look into these symptoms so that perhaps I can get a second opinion. I'm not faulting the doctor and his diagnosis. The children may simply be sick with something he's never seen before. I have no one else to turn to, Mr. Gomez. I'm sure that you can see my desperation in my penmanship.
The attached medical papers are unaccounted for, either having been misplaced long ago or locked away in some other classified government file. Records indicate that Mr. Gomez sent his next letter through priority mail, which may have gotten it to Liliana a few days earlier than usual. As if it was important to save even just a few seconds, he skips any written formalities this time and gets right into his instructions.
Liliana, you gave me enough information to get me started on a theory about what's going on up there, but I'm not certain of anything yet, and I don't want to make the situation worse with bad advice. I'll send a follow-up letter very soon and renew the urgency concerning your situation with my superiors. Until then, follow these directions carefully. Tell me, are there any new, unfamiliar objects that you've seen recently? Anything that could possibly come from the stolen equipment that was left behind? If you haven't seen something strange and unfamiliar to you, then perhaps the children have mentioned it in passing when they think you weren't listening. If they got their hands on a new, let's call it a toy, they might not have told you about it. I have to emphasize, think about any objects you may have heard about recently, no matter how plain or small it may be. If you find such an out-of-place thing, or get the kids to tell you where they hid it, do not touch it if it's metallic or inside any sort of container with a leaf-like trefoil symbol on it. Don't use your hands and treat it like poison. Wear gloves and use a tool or kitchen utensils to move it outside and bury it in an unmarked hole in the ground that you will be able to locate again. You might find something that is, in fact, perfectly safe, but at this point, it's time to treat anything suspicious as dangerous. Also, be careful around anything this object might have touched. Treat it like a poison that contaminates everything near it. Be safe.
There is also news from Sister Marta that likely arrived at the same time. It's the last one we found from her in Liliana's box of letters.
Dearest Liliana, I am writing you from a hospital, but do not concern yourself over my health, not when you are going through so many challenges. I have felt unwell for the past few days and decided to take precautions, thinking it best to have my condition monitored in a place where I can rest. I am feeling confident that I will recover soon. I don't wish to worry you. I've just always found it best to share medical events with close friends and family in case the worst outcome should happen, not that I expect such an outcome. I have little else to do at this hospital other than write letters, although I'm sure that it will take longer to send or receive them while I'm here. But never mind any delays in our correspondence. I've always enjoyed catching up on your retellings of what those little troublemakers of yours have been doing. When you first arrived at the mission, you had stars in your eyes and saw a light and purpose in your life. Your descriptions of the vista view from the town inspired me to come see it for myself, and I regret I was never able to make the trip. The adults there may have lost their way, but I believe that deep down, most of them appreciate what you've done in giving their forgotten youth guidance and a matriarchal voice in life. They may simply be too worried and involved with their own wants to remember to convey that appreciation. You are always loved by your charges and those of us back home at the convent. The long days at your post will not last forever, and at some point, you and those children will be free to leave a dying community and explore the world. You could always begin the next part of your journey by taking a well-earned rest here with the other sisters and tell them some of your many stories. I very much look forward to seeing you again. If I don't get the chance to send another letter in time, I hope you have a lovely Christmas. Thank you for sending me a scarf for the colder weather coming our way. It must have taken you a while to knit. I'm sure doing so kept you happily busy.
Liliana's next response to Hernando was received a week later, and with the truth it brings, an alarming series of events comes to light. Her handwriting in this one is in stark contrast to her previous letter. The strokes are slow and deliberate, but also faint, like she suddenly lacked the strength to press her pen fully to the paper. Or maybe she was just feeling unhappy, regretful, or resigned. Her spirit seems to have been broken at some point.
Mr. Gomez, as hard as I looked, I was unable to find the object you described, yet I don't think I want to. Even so, I believe I've all but confirmed its existence. The children confessed. Minutes after I received your last letter, I began to feverishly search for a strange metal as you advised. I looked at all of the orphans' usual hiding places throughout the mission. I checked their sheets, overturned their beds, scoured the cabinets and dressers. I explored the grounds for any places they may have buried something and felt around in the old dead trees where they've stashed away things they didn't want me to find before. After a couple of hours or so with the sick children watching me all the while, it occurred to them that I was trying to find something they once had in their possession, or which they never should have had. I don't understand what this object is, or where it came from, or what it does, but it sounds like a profane idol of some sort, an ungodly relic. I would have avoided such an object entirely the moment I understood that it could spread a poison through the air itself. But the children, I can't understand what's gotten into them. How could they not imagine the danger to themselves and their caretakers, and instead only see its sinister potential? It pains me to say it, but they carry vengeance in their hearts, even at such an age. God, forgive me for not teaching them better. Though they didn't know the totality of what they did, their actions are still reprehensible. They found your object in the street a day after the revolutionaries gave us a visit, the tyre tracks still fresh. They were enthralled by what I would call its odd properties. Daniela liked it the most and kept it to herself at first. That may explain why she seems to be the sickest of the children. Instead of telling me and bringing me what they found, they kept it hidden away in one of their secret places. I haven't the strength anymore to look for it, and I believe them when they told me they got rid of it already anyway. If only they had shared all of this much sooner, when we still had time. They named it their evil sparkling thing. They called it evil, and yet they still treated it like a fascinating little toy. I'm out of words to describe the ways in which they think. It was a small metal circular stone, about the size of a bottle cap, but much heavier. Who knew such a tiny thing could cause so much pain? I have never heard of such a poison. Is it something science created? I grew up in the countryside, in an ascetic household. I was later isolated from a cruel world in the convent. I purposely kept myself ignorant of the darkness around us out of fear, to try and avoid the stress from worrying over things I couldn't change. That darkness caught up with me anyway. As they described it, the sparkling thing gave off a peculiar luster, and it made enough of its own heat to warm their cold hands on a chilly night. They treated it like some magical charm instead of an abomination. Even when it started making them sick, they became more interested in how they could use it against others instead of worrying about their own health. To everyone who had slighted them in the past, they saw a chance for some puerile payback. One after the next, they listed their victims. Some of the children cried as they revealed their guilt. There were different ringleaders for each of their targets, and peer pressure kept everyone reined in. First was the elderly store owner. They wanted him out of the way so they could steal from him. During one of our visits, they slipped their poison into the pocket of his coat, which hangs by the door until he puts it on later, either when it gets cold in the shop or he leaves at the end of the day. They retrieved it several days later on another visit. The children couldn't imagine that he would get sick enough to need to go to hospital, they tell me. And yet, the news only encouraged them to inflict further harm. The object was later snuck between the town drunks during Sunday Mass, where it remained without the pair knowing for all of 2 hours. Now that I look back on that day, I can recall them both limping out afterwards. It must have burned their legs to the fabric of their clothing, likely too high up for amputation to be an option should it come to that. Will such an operation be the only way to save their lives at some point? I don't know enough about these burns. The children still have yet to heal, and their red spots seem to grow more painful each day. These injuries and illnesses are slow and insidious. I pray they also aren't irreparable. Surely these ailments can't last the rest of our lives. When they poisoned the elderly woman who helps me despite not at all being liked by the children, they did so by leaving their sparkling thing inside her personal food cupboard overnight. All it took to make her gravely ill was a piece of metal kept by her boxed provisions, and somehow it turned them toxic and yet didn't change the taste enough for her to notice. How is this possible? And it gets worse still. The children sickened 2 other people in town that I hadn't heard about. In fact, they did so over a month ago, shortly after they first realized what they had done to the store owner and saw that the power they possessed could bring down even healthy adults. Lord, give me strength. Daniela still had a father. He was a layabout and addicted to gambling to the point where he threw away what little money he made at card games instead of trying to make a better life for himself and his daughter. She's the only one among the children who wasn't truly an orphan. She just had nowhere else to go. Over the years, the others would often treat her differently because she still had a parent, even one uninterested in her. She must have felt like an outsider at times, different, separated. So she decided to change that. One night, she snuck into her estranged father's home and placed the object in his pillow. The man already slept for 12 hours a day from what I've heard, and she didn't retrieve the evil little thing until 3 days had passed. After she told me what she'd done, I alerted the local authorities, and he was found in his bed with severe burns and skin and hair peeling off of his head this morning. But that isn't what killed him. He had choked to death on his own blood. Maybe there was nothing to be done for him, but he had shut himself up in his home for all that time and must have died only recently. I apologize for painting such a vivid and grotesque picture, but it's all I have left. My pleas and concerns have gone unheard, and now I find myself surrounded by rot and death. When I told Daniela of her father's passing, she didn't seem at all affected. She appeared cold, without emotion, only telling me that she was sorry if anyone misses him. I asked her then and there if she or any of the others had ever tried to poison me. She replied with an emphatic no, they would never do that. I was the closest person they had to a mother. I was strict but kind and patient. And there was yet one more life in this town that they had come to not feel so warmly about. One of their own. Little Louis. To the others, he was always like an annoying little brother, but still one of them, to a point. They blamed him for me finding out about their snack stash, which eventually led to the discovery of what they were doing to the people who live here. He had also wanted to tell me everything. He had gotten scared about the sudden, vengeful nature among his peers, the illnesses, the loss of hope among them, which they had traded for the tempting sinfulness that was already a pestilence among this community, and for wanting to turn to me for help, which at one point the children had never hesitated to do. They poisoned him. With tears in their eyes, the kids he once considered friends admitted everything. Except for Daniela. She seems to have no remorse, and maybe she never had any. I think she's come to hate this world. To punish Louis for just thinking about betraying them, the children pinned him to the floor and forced him to swallow their poison. That's how small the deadly thing is. I can't begin to imagine what it did to him while it was in his stomach for several hours, before it made him so sick that he threw it back up. It makes sense now why he suddenly became so weak. He's bleeding from his mouth and nose, losing hair, can't keep anything down, bedridden. I'm unsure how long he'll last, or how much he'll suffer. The other children now see for themselves what they've done to others, and to someone close to them. Some of the orphans had a crisis of conscience after that, and at the risk of furthering Daniela's wrath, they finally disposed of their sparkling thing by tossing it off the mountainside and into one of the ravines around us. She'll never find her precious idol again, and I lost my chance to ever lay my eyes on it. From my perspective, it's like it never existed. And like my wards were all struck down by a mysterious, unknowable malady. But I believe all of it. Everyone, save for Daniela and Louis, too weak to speak to me at this point, poured their souls out and begged me for forgiveness. But it's not me who can provide it. If they want mercy for their terrible behaviour, they'll need to look deep into their hearts and seek it from the Almighty. And yet I still love them. I have to. Unconditionally. Because no one else in this world will. The system failed them. And I also failed them. Mr. Gomez, I don't know if I'll be able to write another letter. The condition in which I find myself a week or two from now may be a perilous one. Please do a favour for me and check in with Sister Marta at the hospital. She is a dear friend and mentor who pulled me out of a dark time. I fear that I may have sickened her with a handmade gift. Take care of those close to you and be thankful of their good health. The next time you come up here, you may happen upon a graveyard instead of a town. But know that I don't blame you. May you offer help to others in my place. Liliana.
Liliana, all is not
Without
lost.
commentary,
Depending on everyone's
Hernandez
dosage of
responds.
radiation, the symptoms may soon pass. With the object no longer nearby, you can focus on your health and recovery. Do whatever you can to keep your strength up. Help is coming. I have learned so much about radiation and its effects this last week. Had a major accident not occurred earlier this year with one of the Soviet Union's power plants, I wouldn't have even considered the cause of your illness. But radioactive material isn't as exotic or cutting edge as you may think. We've known about it for a long time, and its use in X-ray photography and cancer therapy has no doubt saved many lives. There are treatments available, and I've been in contact with an old friend who now lives in the United States and knows all about this field. Also, we were able to track down Ernesto. He had been in the custody of the revolutionaries for several weeks and eventually freed. Although they left him in rough shape, since then he's been hiding in a small village far from you, just as he had tried to do previously in your town. We had a little talk and got him to open up about what must have happened. Ernesto was once a doctor at the hospital in the city closest to you, but even with this income, his side activities caused him to build up a large debt. He embezzled hospital funds, and at times even sold off equipment that he claimed were broken. He fled when his crimes were discovered, but the damage was done, and the hospital had lost a great deal of money. Its assets and most of its employees were repositioned to a state-run facility elsewhere nearby, but the old building was not entirely emptied by the time the revolutionaries moved into the area. They raided the abandoned building and likely sold the majority of their findings for scrap, but one piece of hardware stood out to them: a radiological therapy device. They must have opened it up to find precious metals inside, not knowing the danger within. The object your children found was undoubtedly the radioactive heart of that device. I'm unclear on how the revolutionaries located Ernesto, but they must have found his information in an employee file on site. They brought him to one of their safe houses and tried to get him to cure their people who were sickened by handling the material, along with making demands, learning what it was they had stolen, and how much it might be worth. Their concept of radiology, foreign or poorly misunderstood. Once they realized that they had lost the device's source at some point and didn't even have it in their possession to show Ernesto, they threatened his estranged family and sent him looking for it, thinking he'd be able to find it easily with a detector he didn't actually have. It sounds like he talked his way to freedom, as he ended up running far away instead. He either didn't take the threat seriously or thought his captors would all be dead soon anyways, or he was just a coward. He refused to answer us either way, though he does send his condolences for the situation he inadvertently brought upon you. I'm confident he'll have time to think about everything over in prison, but you still have hope. I finally have the good news you were waiting to hear. The government is fast-tracking a so-called rescue operation and is planning to get you and the children out of there on a bus ride off that mountain by Christmas Eve or day. Perhaps it makes no difference to you, but the cynic in me must add that I already know they're only doing this for a good Christmas story and a photo opportunity in a time where the administration needs a win, and that they'll also be bringing everyone straight to the best hospital in the country for immediate treatment. I think that once the information about a radiation accident has been verified, they suddenly felt the need to act on a contain the situation before word gets around. I would expect shady government employees to approach you at some point while you're in care and make you sign a form agreeing to no-cost medical treatment in exchange for never revealing any of what actually happened in that town. The important part is that help is on the way. That's really all that matters. Please do everything you can to keep conditions stable for the next few days. As I write this, your ride out and the proper attention you deserve are less than a week away. I've always fought for you, Liliana, even as I feel deep regret for not doing more. I'll see you soon, assuming they let me visit you in the burn ward, which is where I figured they'd be sending everyone. God hasn't abandoned you. Yours, Hernando Gomez.
This is where the story could have ended, had just these letters been discovered. We'd have been left wondering what happened, maybe clinging on to some hope that everyone had made it out and received that care, even if they were left with life-changing injuries. Sadly, the first letter we were allowed to read, and Liliana's final letter, destroyed that hope long before we got to know her. She replied to Hernando's update, but that response never reached his desk. It was intercepted by officials, deemed a national security threat, then put into a lead box and filed away into a government vault. It was only recently uncovered and declassified, but the president of Colombia wanted to give a selected team of investigators a chance to uncover the whole story before anything about the incident goes public. It has been buried so thoroughly by the Vargas administration that the knowledge of the event had seemingly disappeared entirely only a few elections later. We can only take some solace in the fact that if not for Liliana Romero, we may never have found out the full truth of what happened to that small, dying mountain town. The story of its last remaining people was nearly lost forever between the bigger incidents at Chernobyl and the similar but arguably worse Goiânia incident in Brazil that occurred in 1987, nearly a full year later. All of Liliana's letters still have trace radioactive elements across their paper fibers and are now also kept inside lead containers, so we wore gloves while handling them. This one was slightly more toxic, perhaps in part due to the presence of blood droplets on the stationery.
Hernando, things are not well. Over the past few days, I've become quite weak. For some time, I've tried to deny what is happening to me. I can't any longer. I have patches of skin that are deep red and won't heal. Several of my fingernails have broken off. I can no longer hold down food, though I don't have an appetite to begin with. I can pull off clumps of hair, and I cough up blood. I've never been so sick. It feels like my body is losing to a common cold. Louis passed away this morning. There was nothing left of him at the end. I'd forgotten what his smile looks like. Now he's wrapped up in a blanket and buried outside. I barely found the strength to dig his grave, but as I understand this invisible poison, as you described it, he can likely keep contaminating others if I leave him in the mission. The other children have become so quiet. I hear them crying when they don't think I'm nearby. They look at me like there's nothing they can say to make it better, or that I hate them. But I don't. I don't care about Ernesto, or the revolutionaries, or political corruption, or any of that. All of them are working together, turned us into victims, or refusing to work together. All that matters to me now, and all I can do, is take care of these young lives until the end. I can't tell if any of us will survive. Thank you for at least caring and trying to get us better lives. You're an honest soul, and I believe also a victim in this tragedy. And no matter what happens to us, please learn to forgive yourself. And, if possible, help Sister Marta in some way. This will hurt her, yet I'm forever grateful for her guidance in life. My hand hurts so much. I can't write everything I wanted to. Maybe God hasn't abandoned us. But maybe I did. By coming to a place that he never watched over to begin with. The ravines look so lovely this time of year.
In early 2023, I was sought out to join a small task team, being one of the few people in the country known to have at one point lived in the town. With us was a mountaineer familiar with the landscape, who guided us to a place that was my childhood home long ago. The roads had worn away and overgrowth covered up any other paths, making the trek a treacherous one. We were also denied the use of a helicopter, out of fear that its rotor blades could kick up dormant radioactive dust. Due to missing or stolen hospital records, the orphan source and its potential wasn't known for certain, which was why the third and final member of our team, other than a provided security officer, was an expert on radioactive material and contamination. He brought along computer and scanning hardware to sample any remaining fallout in the soil. The fate of my old home had also been an unknown. We only knew that last contact was made shortly before the revolutionaries completely cut off all access to the area. By the time they had been driven out in 1990, the town was found to be abandoned already, although the lack of bodies suggested that most of its remaining people fled before it was too late, or died elsewhere. Instead of performing a rescue for the newspapers in late 1986, the government happened upon an event that they covered up and hid away. Some old reports mentioned a quarantine of the area, but it may have just been barely enforced. Anyone who made it out and knew of the cause of the illnesses may have been threatened or bribed to stay silent, or never found out what was happening to begin with. The letters don't confirm whether or not Sister Liliana told her neighbors the reason why so many people had gotten terribly sick. We finally arrived at the town after a 3-day hike and put on respirators just in case the area was still toxic. At first, levels were found to be just slightly above background, as expected. A small sample of material can only contaminate so much for so long. Handling it is the real danger, not airborne particles. Certain spots, like the general store register and one of the pews in the crumbling church, still showed levels approaching that of an X-ray exposure. All things considered, the ghost town was in remarkably good condition. The store's windows were broken and it had been emptied out, but that was the extent of the damage outside of decades-old deterioration. We found no vehicles or physical money, further evidence that at least a few escaped. The old mission was the only location where we kept on our respirators, as it had never been cleaned and still had levels that rivaled some of Pripyat's hotspots, according to our professional. I never asked what he thought the makeup of the orphan source could be, though I recall him remarking that it must have been particularly dirty. It sounds as if something used for medicine packed a lot of punch in a small package, or was poorly enriched. A dangerously rudimentary source used to cut equipment costs may also be apt descriptors. Once the town was deemed safe for us to explore, aside from the orphanage, a helicopter carrying a demolition crew was called in. Aircraft designed to fight forest fires doused the old mission to prevent further contaminated dust from being blown away off of the crumbling toxic building, and the structure was gradually demolished over the course of a day. The site was to be covered in concrete, and the rest of the town officially marked as a restricted area, out of an abundance of caution. It was a strange feeling for me personally to see my former neighborhood locked in time, and remembering my days as a child playing football with forgotten friends in those empty streets. Back when the town still had a heartbeat. I wish I could reveal its name, as it's actually quite a beautiful one, but I'm not really supposed to. If you live in Colombia or ever visit, don't go looking for it. Unlike tours in Pripyat, whenever they may resume following the terrible war in Ukraine, this land was never properly remediated. There could still be pockets of harmful contaminants lingering about. I realized that I must mention what we found out concerning the ultimate fate of Liliana and the orphans. Well, we aren't entirely sure. Although we did locate Luis's grave, the other children and Liliana herself are unaccounted for. They aren't believed to have survived, unfortunately, but not discovering what exactly happened to them, in what order, and what their remains could have told us is tragic and offers little in the way of closure. Still, there was one significant find. While the building was in the process of being torn down, things were paused and my team was called over to investigate a previously hidden room, which was exposed when floorboards were removed. In a corner of the small cellar was a disguised partition space, about 4 meters wide and 6 meters across. Whatever the room had been used for in the distant past, more recently the doorway had been boarded up and bricked off, making it look like it had never been there. At some point, the children must have found the loose bricks at the bottom of the wall and pried them out, along with the old rotting boards, and made themselves a secret clubhouse of sorts. They had hidden the entrance with some water barrels, although it was so small to begin with that only a child could squeeze through. Inside of the dusty room were about a dozen mostly run-down candles, a tattered rug, several copies of the Bible with its pages covered in crayon drawings, a few of which depicted the children getting their revenge on the local adults they didn't like, and most notably, a single wooden chair, barely able to stand and with its back missing. It looked like the orphans had treated it as an altar, as atop it was a small blue pillow, something toddlers might rest their head upon. After all these years, it still showed the impression of an object it once held, an insidious thing that had irradiated the fabric to the point where the colors had been changed around where it sat. The settled dust in the room was toxic, and the pillow's readings were exceptionally high, to the point where direct contact could still prove fatal given enough time. The secret room where they once kept their sparkling thing was a haunting sight. Radiation is sometimes described as an invisible fire, and here, in a hidden chamber under an old mission in the rural foothills of Colombia, a torch was still burning all these years later. I wonder if some of the children came to worship their discovery like the cursed idol Liliana called it. A small, warm chunk of metal that caused so much damage. We'll never know for sure, and now their conspiratorial hiding place is under tons of concrete. Last I heard, the government continues to hunt for the orphan source, which would still be dangerous to anyone that comes near it. I think they'll track it down eventually. It must have left a trail. I recently delivered a copy of Liliana's last letter to Hernando in person. He's where he's always been, and only retired a few years back after leading his entire department for a couple of decades. What happened to her and the orphans haunts him, that's clear. But I think it's also inspired him to work harder and have a softer touch with people. He saw firsthand the failures of the system, and together with a more modernized and less corrupt government, has helped create a better state welfare institution. Finally, being able to read Liliana's last words confirmed the worst fears he's held in for so long, yet closed a painful chapter of his life. A benefit in the end. I hope it helps him rest easier in his golden years. He has also formed a friendship with Sister Marta, and the two exchanged letters for years, well into the age of email. She passed away from cancer in 2017, making it into her 80s. There's no telling if radiation exposure was what eventually caused it, but she still lived a long life. Her only regret being that she too was unable to save a fellow sister or her wards. He isn't ready to share any of the letters they sent to one another, but I expect that we'll get to see them one day. He did reveal that Marta helped him through his feelings of guilt and uselessness following the events. I don't know if I'd call it irony, but both Hernando and Sister Marta had cancer in their 60s. He was saved, and she was given another 20 years or so on this earth through radiotherapy. While radiation can be a scary and seemingly malicious killer, it isn't evil. It just has to be contained and used carefully, like any other sharpened tool. I'm not frightened of it. When I went up that mountain, I was scared more by the thought of seeing a familiar face fallen apart and in disarray, perhaps littered with the desiccated bodies of its last inhabitants. But it wasn't. Actually, it looked peaceful at rest, and it's still up there, slowly sinking into the landscape. I'm going to take a risk and upload this story to the internet before the government publishes its full incident report. That could take years, and despite improvements from the days of the event itself, I don't fully trust that they won't try to make it all disappear again. One last thing that I hesitate to even give a mention In the regions surrounding the foothills that once housed copper miners, there have been new folk tales, really little more than urban legends, that tell of a sickly woman with barely any hair, ragged clothes, and rotting gray skin. She shambles about and only speaks in low moans as she tries to find her equally sick children. All the while, anything she touches is forever tainted by an unseen poison. I highly doubt that there is an actual survivor roaming around. Radiation that mutates people into monsters yet keeps them alive is a thing of science fiction and late-night movies. Even if it's a cruel way to remember Liliana and her orphans, you could say that at least she's being remembered. I don't know who first passed around the tale, but it goes to show how a once-in-a-lifetime sight like a radiation victim can persist in local lore. That isn't the story I wanted to share, but whether she's immortalized with horror embellishments by the campfire, or through real letters from actual people, she perseveres, larger than life. Some years ago, I worked with a tunneling crew. A job like that draws all kinds of people. Sure, it boils down to one guy holding the figurative shovel, but another guy has to point where to dig, and yet another guy has got to get the dirt out. On a larger scale, it can easily get out of hand without proper management. Our crew was working on expanding a subway tunnel. It wasn't anything we couldn't handle, but my life was in a bit of a mess at the moment. My wife and I had just had our first kid, and I was having trouble keeping up with the new lifestyle. My wife was a trooper, but no matter what I did, I always felt like I was doing something wrong. That baby must have been the most patient one ever, as I fumbled with the most basic chores. I'd tuck her in too tight or get the temperature or the formula wrong. It was just one mess after another, and that's after working a 10-hour shift. The only thing I got right was putting her to sleep. I'd tuck my hand behind her little head, shush her and sing. She'd go out like a light. Bam, down for the count. That one thing sort of made up for all my other mistakes. I have to thank my mom for the tips someday. It's an old song. It goes a little something like, "Oh, I, fuff, my little one." Like a bolt of lightning from a clear blue sky, the subway tunnel gig was canceled. We got to work and there was a big sign telling us to go home. I called my manager but didn't get an answer. I called the guy at the top and the number was disconnected. I was standing there with a crew of 8 other guys looking at me. Someone kept asking if we were getting paid, or what to do about our gear. Some of it was still locked away in the tunnels. The hours passed and we didn't know if we still had a job. When I finally got hold of my shift manager, he didn't have a lot to say. "They're shutting us down. I'm sorry. Gotta start looking for a new job." Not the kind of thing you want to hear when you just had your first kid. The whole crew was looking at me for answers, and I didn't have anything comforting to say. Can't sing those guys to sleep. I told them the truth. We were out of a job, and no one seemed to know what the hell was going on. I kept calling management to demand some answers, but all numbers were either disconnected or put me on an infinite hold. It wasn't until I wormed my way into one of the numbers from my boss's boss that I got anywhere. Some corporate big shot who had his name on a lot of papers and not a speck of dirt on his shoes. I was about to give him a piece of my mind when suddenly he changed tone. "We're looking for a crew. There's another job in the area. Not tunneling, but should be within your skill set." "And how do we know it won't be shut down like the last one?" "You don't, but it's the best you got. It pays well. Real well. I can bring all you guys in starting tomorrow. What do you say?" I said the only thing I could. I said yes. It was tough to come home that day. I'd been surrounded by this ceaseless vitriol all afternoon. One of the guys had been crying in the porta potty. This was supposed to be a long-term gig, and now we were all on shaky ground. Whatever this new job entailed didn't exactly calm us down, but at least we could keep our heads up a little longer. I don't think I did a single thing right that evening. I forgot to wash my hands when I picked up my baby girl, getting her hair wispy and a little dirty. I changed her diaper but couldn't get the thing to sit right, and I think I used too much powder. It was just one thing after another. It wasn't until I sat down to watch the news that I finally got to do the one thing I was good at, singing her to sleep. One verse and she was out. Oh, I, fuff. My wife joined me on the couch, speaking in a hushed voice. She was just as worried about me as the job, but I could tell she was trying to stay positive. She asked all kinds of questions, like what we were doing, and for how long, and with what people. And I didn't have an answer for any of it. Not unlike the talking heads on the TV. All I could say is that we had a time, a place, and a generous paycheck. Just be careful, she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. Our girl can't sleep without you. Doing tunnel work is rough for a number of reasons. In summer, you're melting away in the heat. In the autumn, you're knee-deep in rainwater. In winter, well, you don't do a lot of digging in the winter. The ground gets frozen and can mess up the equipment. Depends on the job site, I guess. We were nearing the end of the season. The last dig of the summer is the one you finish just before you go on vacation, and my guys have been robbed of theirs. I knew of at least one guy who had to cut his trip to Tallahassee. He wouldn't shut up about it. It was better than having no job at all, but the disappointment was immeasurable. We'd been promised stable work for years to come. Now we were fighting for scraps. The location turned out to be a construction site. Not a dig, mind you. There's a difference. The place was roughly the size of a football field, lined with chain-link fence wrapped in yellow plastic. There were all kinds of construction tools lying around, seemingly abandoned. There was even a bulldozer. We waited for about an hour before someone showed up. There was this one guy with protective glasses and a hard hat, our supposed foreman. He seemed friendly enough, probably someone a bit further down the career ladder. He came up to us and clapped his hands to get our attention. "Everyone feeling all right?" he asked, throwing his arms out. There was a murmur, but no one was particularly enthusiastic about the whole thing. We weren't a construction crew. Then again, at that point, we had no idea what kind of crew we were supposed to be. "We're gonna go through all the details in a bit. I just want to say, I know this ain't ideal. We didn't have a choice in the matter. That said, if this works out, we're gonna have a lot more work for you going forward. So let's get started, yeah?" That lifted our spirits a little. I saw a couple of nods and the hint of a smile. Maybe things would work out. We walked into the site. He showed us this spot at the far end, right next to a jackhammer. There was a hole about 3 feet deep, 6 feet across. It looked like they dug it out with shovels by hand. In the middle of the hole, there was a rock formation like a white spike poking out of the ground. It was roughly the length of my arm. "This is what we found. This particular mineral is uncommon in this part of the country. It's mainly used in pharmaceuticals." "What's it called?" "Pilalith. It's used in something called Compound 5, life-saving stuff." He went on to explain the process. Essentially, this construction site was found to be littered with pilalith minerals. The entire site needed to be dug out carefully, and the minerals had to be extracted as a whole. 2 guys were on standby to measure, catalog, and mark down each extracted sample down to the milligram. The tools were oddly specific. For example, we couldn't use jackhammers. We had to slowly work the base of the mineral with a portable water jet cutter. We couldn't touch the minerals without wearing rubber gloves, and we had to put out sprinklers near every active dig spot to suppress mineral dust. That, and there was a gas mask mandate. "It's important that we don't breathe this stuff in. You don't want that." By the end of our first day, we had dug up 5 of those spike things. They were all carefully placed in a vacuum container and sealed with silicone spray. All that work for what equates to a suitcase of rocks? At the end of our shift, one of the guys noticed something funny. Technically, we were right next to our abandoned subway gig. Out through one door, in through another. It took some time to get used to the new setup. We had to work with a lot of protective gear, and we kept getting soaked by the water jet and sprinklers. Working in that kind of environment gives you all kinds of uncomfortable aches, especially when you need to have a gas mask. The mix of heat and water kept fogging up the glass, sucking the salt from my skin and stinging my eyes. It was exhausting. We usually managed to get somewhere around 6 to 10 pilalis a day, depending on the weather and how fast we could get to the base of the mineral. They were all roughly 3 feet down, but a few of them were a bit smaller and some were a bit bigger. There was one of them that was so tall that it poked out of the ground, but it had turned a metallic gray. We sent a picture of it to the foreman and he said it was a no-go. It's gone bad. Cut it, leave it, don't matter. And every night when I came home, I could barely stand. I fell asleep in the shower once, waking only when the water turned cold. I'd remember to eat just because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It was a strange feeling, and my wife could tell I wasn't doing all right. I felt bad not being able to keep up with the housework, but hey, at least I could sing my baby to sleep. That I could do. The fact that the site was so close to our old tunnel job was really strange. It was literally a stone's throw away, but cities can get like that sometimes. It might take 20 to 30 minutes in traffic to get from one street to another, but walking there at a brisk pace takes only a couple of minutes. I hadn't even thought about it until they pointed it out. The job was going to take weeks, and maybe months at the pace we were going. We got the go-ahead to bring in some more guys, but it was hard to find people for a temp job at short notice. I managed to get a hold of 4 more in total, but trying to bring them up to speed was a hassle. I kept getting all these questions that I couldn't answer. For example, why couldn't we just dig up the whole site and then filter out the polyolith later? We could have done it all in about a week tops, and yeah, they were right, but we weren't allowed to do that. And what the hell is a polyolith anyway? After a full week of working with the stuff, we were getting into a sort of a rhythm. We split up between surface testing, excavation, cutting, and transport. I was one of the cutters. I stood in a dirt pit with brown water up to my knees, trying not to get my fingers blown off as the drainage pump flopped around. Now, I'm good at what I do, but we were working without proper routine and oversight. It was the Wild West. First accident happened 8 days into the job. One of the guys, and can't remember his name, got his face dust sprayed with polyolith. The sprinkler stopped working and he had to change his filter after a cut. All we saw was how he stepped away, took the mask off, and had a seizure. They had to carry him away and wash the dust off with a hose. He got back to work after a couple of days, but I don't think he was ever the same. There was something off about him. Not quite a 1,000-yard stare, but he would tilt his head up at strange angles every now and then like he was looking at something beyond the clouds. That, and he stopped complaining about his canceled Tallahassee trip. The second accident was one of the other cutters. He'd just finished a smaller spike when I saw him dip one of his legs down. It looked like he'd just stepped wrong, but there was this look of genuine surprise on his face. And then we heard a pop, like something exploding, and the guy screamed like a wounded animal. This repetitive shriek over and over as he clutched his leg. When we got to him, I could see most of his foot and part of his leg had been crushed. Not just a sprain or something, but mangled. You could barely tell there was a foot at the end. It looked like cloth-covered meat. When they carried him off, he was delirious. I heard him mumble as they shut the ambulance door. Breathing. 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 It had been any other job, or if it had been any other job, we'd have called it quits long ago. One workplace accident, it happens. But 2? And on such short notice? No, now that doesn't happen. Problem was, it felt like the big wigs were one step away from shutting us down all over again. They hounded us with that fact every chance they got. The foreman would slide in a comment about it when he could. Like at the end of every shift, I gave him an update on our progress. He always asked if things had gone smoothly, and whenever I said it did, he'd just respond, Good. Don't know how we could afford keeping this afloat if it didn't. Every damn time. So yeah, we had to make do. It was dirty work for dirty people, but what choice did we have? No one else was hiring, and getting the whole crew to another site on such short notice was impossible. You don't spend that kind of money on a whim, and there was no standing contract lurking around the corner. These kinds of jobs take months of planning and contract negotiation. You'll be eating well into your savings long before you could see a paycheck. We kept having trouble with our gear, too. Not just because things bend and break, that's normal. Wear and tear is part of the job. The problem was that we had no idea what kind of supports we were looking at, and most of our equipment was still at the tunnel site. We kept having trouble with the ground shifting. Sometimes when we dug out the pilalis, the dirt would collapse. It wasn't bad enough to hurt anyone, but it was frustrating. We had a bunch of sandbags and supports on the old dig site, but we weren't allowed to get them. I kept hearing things around the site. The guy who'd inhaled the dust complained about losing his sense of taste. The guy who had his foot crushed was admitted to psychiatric care. Another guy kept talking about how he found this black door at his apartment complex that he couldn't remember seeing before. Just a whole set of strange rumors. Every day felt like walking into a ghost story. Someone had something eerie to say. My first unusual experience was nowhere near as dramatic. I was working the water jet cutter when I accidentally angled it downward. I left it on a little too long and cut into the rocks surrounding the mineral. At first, I thought I'd hit a sewer line, but that would mean it was inches from the surface. There was no way that was true. But the ground erupted with this foul, black, organ-like ichor. Like fish guts and mineral oil. I got out of there real quick, and the moment I stepped out of the hole, the dirt collapsed around me, almost like the ground shook a little. On our third week, some people got sick. We thought it was a stomach bug going around, but we figured out the common denominator. Everyone who'd gotten sick had regularly eaten dairy products for lunch or breakfast. Turns out, on closer inspection, that a lot of dairy spoiled around the dig site. Like, to the point where we could track it just by looking at it. If we left a chocolate milk out in the open, the damn thing will be solid white mold before the end of the day. So yeah, no dairy on the dig site. I remember once in the break room, 6 of us were sitting around just chatting, and this one guy joins us with yogurt. He knows we're not supposed to eat dairy, but he doesn't care anymore. He's staring straight ahead, shoveling spoonfuls into his mouth. I don't need to look to see that it's gone bad. I can smell it. We can all smell it. And he just sits there chewing it down like he doesn't have a care in the world. You can't eat that stuff. You'll get sick. The guy turns his head and licks the container clean. He doesn't even blink. You don't think what we're doing is sick? You think this is okay? It's a job. Calm down. We're all sick in the fucking head, the guy says, clutching his head. Fucking parasites. He didn't stay long. After starting the third fight that same day, we had to let him go. And coming home every day was like coming up for air after a long dive. Everything felt brighter, and I'd happily do whatever was asked of me. Changing diapers? No problem. Taking out the trash? Wonderful. Anything and everything was better than staying another damn minute at the site. Thinking about going back the next day made me feel like a rock in the pit of my stomach. I'd look in the bathroom mirror, trying to convince myself to get through one more day. But while I might not be the best at being a homebody, my wife rightfully pointed out that I was doing worse than usual. She was right. I was. It wasn't a conscious thing, but once I noticed it, I couldn't ignore it. For example, I would put all the dishes into a vertical pile instead of the dishwasher. There was just something hypnotic about arranging them in a pattern. I would sometimes stand in front of the open refrigerator holding my hands out like I was warming them by a fire. It got to the point where I was scared to be alone with my baby girl. What if I forgot her on the changing table? I couldn't live with myself if she got hurt. And still, we needed the money. Rent was going up, expenses were going up, and we needed a new set of tires for the car. We'd already sold off our spare car, We couldn't afford to go without one. It was bad enough that we already had to share. I remember this one night, as I was standing by my baby's crib. She was having trouble going back to sleep, so I leaned in to sing. Problem is, I couldn't remember the words. I'd never written them down or anything, so there was a sudden sense of loss in me. Like I'd forgotten something that was a part of me, instead of just a song. And my girl, she could tell. She was screaming her little heart out, begging me to remember. And I stood there opening and closing my mouth like a fish out of water, trying to explain that the words just weren't there. "I'm sorry," I said, shaking my head. "I'm so sorry, baby." When she fell asleep that night, it wasn't because she felt safe and cared for. It was exhaustion, just like me. By that time, coming to the site felt like walking into purgatory. One guy is off in the corner hurling his guts out. One guy's crying on a bench. One is lying on his back looking up at the sky. 2 guys don't even show up for work. We barely make progress. What little we get is mostly from what we'd started the previous shift. Around lunch, one guy was taking off his protective gear and going to town on a palaver like he was a sick cow on a salt lick. We had to pry him off and send him home. He laughed the whole way. By late afternoon, I was the only one working on this particular dig. This damn thing was big. Big enough that I'd have trouble lifting it by myself. I had to dig a little deeper than usual to get to the base, and I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have. By the time I pulled out the water cutter, the cable dislodged something and the entire hole collapsed with me in it. I was buried under the dirt. Thank God for all that gear. I was lying face down in the dirt, and I could breathe a little thanks to my gas mask and the porous ground. But it was like sucking air through a straw. I barely knew what was up or down. No matter which direction I pushed, it felt like something was pushing back. It's like the ground was trying to absorb me. I wasn't down for long, but in that moment, I felt this intense sense of dread. Not just a claustrophobic panic, but something else. I could imagine myself being stuck there, solidified as a relic in eternal stasis, like watching myself fossilize. All sense of time and passage of the world melted away. I could imagine the years flying by, leaving me helpless. If I'd been down there 1,000 years, would I even want to get back up? By the time they pulled me out, I was screaming. I don't remember, but I was. Apparently, I was begging for them to put me back in the ground. At the end of the day, I was sitting across from one of the machine operators. He was trying to have a glass of water, but he ended up throwing it out. It tasted funny. "We got to do something about the equipment. We have tens of thousands of dollars still stuck in those tunnels. Hundreds of thousands, maybe. You think they're happy to leave it there?" he asked. "You honestly think they care?" "I care. Hell, I'll take it off their hands if they ain't using it." "You're not suggesting we steal from the company?" "What company? Do you even know who we're working for? You know what we're doing? You see any workers' comp going out to the guy who's saying everything tastes like gasoline?" I shook my head. I didn't like it, but he was right. He took off his hard hat, dropping it on the table. "I say we get our fair share, split it right down the middle. You in?" "I'm in." I told my wife I'd be late the next day. 3 guys volunteered to help pick up things after our shift. There was a fair chance that we wouldn't get anything, but at that point we didn't care. Some of us were just desperate enough to get a big paycheck to cash out and make a run for it. We didn't want to be there anymore. None of us did. We drove down to the tunnels and prepared ourselves. One guy brought a 2-wheeler, another brought flashlights, and one brought walkie-talkies. We were going to turn the power on, but it was easy to get lost down there. Half the map wasn't finished and most of the rooms were dead ends. You could get lost on the best of days and we were barely functional. We made our way into the tunnels, keeping in touch as we went. It didn't take long for us to find some personal items, but there was quite a bit more to it. We could tell others had been down there. There was a whole bunch of things we hadn't seen before. Some of it I could barely understand. For example, there was this one drill that looked like an 8-foot-long syringe on a rail leading to a hole in the wall. That's not what we were there for, but I couldn't help but raise my eyebrow at that. While the others found some gear, I decided to take a look a little further in. There was this one space I'd been working in just before we got shut down that I knew had a backpack full of seismic measuring equipment. It didn't take all that long for me to find my way back there, but the backpack was long gone. Figures. That thing alone was at least 25 grand. As I was about to head back to the others, I swept my flashlight across a black door. I didn't remember that ever being there. I checked in with the others over the walkie, and they were still trying to dislodge one of the backup drills. I had some time, so I decided to check it out. I stepped inside just as the walkie-talkie crackled to life again. "Got the power, hold on to something." Seconds later, there was a hum and a crackle. I swept my flashlight across the room, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. It was a small cube-shaped room with the furthermost wall being pale white dirt. I saw there was a light fixture overhead, so I searched for the walls for a switch. I found it and turned it on, just to see if there was something I'd missed. The moment the light came on, felt like staring into the sun. I hadn't realized how used I'd gotten to the dark. That, and the light seemed to be some kind of UV. It wasn't just bright, it was warm. The moment it turned on, I saw the wall shift. Not by much, just a twitch. Dirt don't move like that. The ground shook as people started calling out on the walkie. Someone was screaming about a burst water pipe. Another one kept going, "What the fuck?" over and over again. I could hear the sound of metal bending and breaking as support snapped, making the tunnels outside crumble. I could hear these blocks of stone, each one heavy enough to crush my car, falling like raindrops. The wall moved, the ground moved. I was standing still, watching solid concrete roll beneath me. The light flickered. A whole section of wall roiled like liquid, only to reveal this enormous glass-like surface. I stepped closer, watching these whirling colors slosh from left to right, up and down, like an organic membrane suspended in gelatin. Blue lines spreading out like petals of a sunflower. As I step back and take in the whole picture, my breath gets stuck in my throat. The entire wall is the bottom half of an eye, a bright blue eye adjusting to the sudden bright light. I've never felt anything like in that moment. It's like the sky keeps falling over and over, like you're taking a step back even though you're standing still, making the world feel smaller with every breath. I could barely understand it. My legs felt so small that I couldn't feel myself walking. The power cut out. The bright blue pupil disappeared, leaving the outline of the shape lingering in my mind's eye. The sounds of the outside world faded away. I could hear the screaming in the walkie like a distant whisper. I could sense the rumble as the tunnels collapsed. I could feel the weight of the organic slosh as a mass of nerves far larger than me moved at breakneck speed from left to right, displacing the air. "It's coming down!" someone cried in the walkie. "Get the fuck out, it's all coming down!" But I couldn't move. I looked straight ahead into the darkness and pushed my hand back towards the door. I couldn't open it. There was a blockage on the outside. The concrete ceiling was starting to crack. My mind pendulumed between sobering fear and a mind-gutting sense of hollowness. I was a father. I was nothing. I was being buried alive. I was pointless. All the while I hear this surreal sound of something beyond my comprehension of scale starting to move, and I realize I'm going to die down there. I'm going to be crushed or left to suffocate. And there's this little voice in the back of my head whispering at me that there's a very real chance I don't come home tonight, that my baby girl isn't going to sleep well ever again. And I just break. I absolutely break. I slam my body against the door. I scream and shout and beat my fists on the metal sheeting. I step back and brace myself, throwing my weight at it, but it doesn't even budge. The voices on the walkie aren't even saying words anymore, having developed into a panicked screeching. I step away from the door towards the eye. I fumble in the dark, picking up a fistful of concrete to use as a weapon. I move closer, ready to plunge my fist into the surface of the eye when I notice something. I'm stepping in liquid. I didn't hear a water pipe burst, not in here. I fumble for my flashlight, and I barely manage to pick it up as my hands keep failing me, but as I turn it on, I realize there's a thin layer of water lining the floor, an oily kind of salt water. Looking up at the eye, I see it leaking at the edges. Tears? Something in me clicks. The rapid eye movement, the sudden sense of panic and collapse. It dawns on me that I've seen this before. I've seen it dozens of times. It's just like when my baby girl wakes up in the middle of the night looking for her papa. That's all it is. And I think about that moment when I was buried at the dig site with that sense of the world passing me by. I wouldn't want to wake from that. I wouldn't want to know which of my friends were dead or alive, which family members made it. I wouldn't want to know just how alone I really was. I'd rather stay a fossil. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was it the whole time. Maybe we've been cleaning the scalp of something and having a really, really bad dream. I turned off my flashlight and stepped a little closer. I could feel this thrumming movement coming from the membrane as nerves contracted, pushing out bucket after bucket of liquid. Meanwhile, I'm closing my eyes and thinking about an imaginary hand placed behind a tender head, fussing about going to sleep, wispy hair getting caught between my fingers. At that moment, the words returned to me. The lullaby. With a shaky voice, I sing them. A voice in the dark, hoping something impossible can hear me and find comfort. Oh, I, Fluff, my little one. Oh, I, Fluff, my little one. I sing it again and again and again. I'm imagining that little bundle in my arms and how it settles into a rhythm, how her breathing steadies with mine, a little hand wrapping around my finger, then letting go as the dreams take hold. And after a while, I realize the wall has stopped moving. It's just white dirt. Nothing is moving, collapsing, or breaking. It's just me in a dark room and my workmates trying to move a boulder outside the door. Something's gone back to sleep. When we got out, things had gone completely to shit. Car alarms were going off, streetlights had died, fire hydrants were pouring out into the street. Waiting for us just outside were 2 patrol vehicles, ready to ask us some serious and uncomfortable questions. The whole ordeal was categorized as a local seismic event. The company decided not to press any charges. They just had us trespassed. But even that would eventually be overturned. See, they still needed someone to work the dig site. There was more palalas to cut, and there was no one around willing to do it. And honestly, who was more experienced working with this stuff than me and my crew? We had started to get the hang of it. We could make up our own rules. And now that I had an idea of what we were dealing with, I could do it in a way that wouldn't get us all killed. So yeah, we got back to work. I've been digging this stuff up for years now. We figured out a good routine and procedure, allowing us to rotate crew in a way that doesn't get us sent to the hospital. I got about 30 guys working with me. There's not a lot of demand for it, but what demand there is pays very well. I don't think you'll find any Craigslist postings for Palalith diggers anytime soon, but we're out there. Sometimes it just looks like a construction site. And sometimes they don't bother trying to hide it. People see a jackhammer and roll their eyes, hoping we won't stick around for long. My girl isn't a baby anymore, but in another sense of the word, she absolutely is. I managed to scrape together a pretty good life for her. I work weekdays along with every second and third weekend of the month, but I get the first week of the month completely off. Just 2 paid vacation weeks a year, though, but the hourly rates are just... I'll admit, I'm a bit spoiled. I could sign off on a new pool and it wouldn't break our budget. But I feel like I had to take a moment to look back at it all. Not just because it was a monumental day of my life, but because it changed something in me. I may be the smallest, most insignificant thing in whatever world this is, but I'm still here. I can still do something. And if I can get that one damn thing right, is that not enough reason to do it? I'm thinking, whenever I'm gray and gone, is my girl gonna remember the fancy vacations and the new car smell of our family Honda? Or is she gonna remember the times I sung her to sleep? I don't need an answer. I know it. I feel it. And somewhere deep underground, there's something that feels the same. Hey, what's up, guys? Kevin from Nightmares Nightly. I hope you liked that one. It was another Saturday story, who I really enjoy. This story was pretty cool. There's only really one qualm I have about it, and it's when he loses his first job, and then he gets the new job digging up these palalis. Also, by the way, it's probably, I have no idea, that's not even a fucking word, so I don't know, it's probably like, if it's not a real word, you can just make up however you want to pronounce it. Let's just say that, pillowlith, palalith, whatever. It was kind of a funny word. I felt weird saying it that way. It's probably not correct, but it's not even a real word, so who cares? When he lost his first job, and then he gets his new job, and they go, it pays well, and then he's like, yeah, it does pay well, and then, 10 minutes later, he's talking about how they had to sell his old car, and they have one car now, because they were scraping by, and I'm like, you're saying it pays well, but you gotta sell all your stuff, and y'all are having trouble with the bills, but that's actually the only problem, the little plot hole I had with it, and it doesn't really affect the plot. But so I enjoyed it. It was a cool story. It had a little bit of a Lovecraftian vibe to it at the end there with this, this earth creature that who knows how long it's been alive and it's just been slumbering beneath the earth. And they were, it seems like they were digging like growths from it is kind of what I got. But I enjoyed it. Saturday's a really good guy, good author, and I hope y'all enjoyed it as well. And as always, thanks for listening, everybody.